Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off into dreamland. But instead of counting sheep, what if I told you some absolutely wild facts about one of television's most chaotic families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes disturbing world of Family Guy, with facts so strange, they might just lull you into the most entertaining sleep of your life. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through Quahog that's perfect for your bedtime routine. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just need something to occupy your mind as you wind down, these Family Guy facts will give you plenty to think about as you drift off to sleep. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's creation. Family Guy almost never made it to air in the first place. Seth MacFarlane created the pilot when he was just 24 years old, working as a writer and animator for Hanna-Barbera. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that it's almost unrecognizable. Brian wasn't even supposed to be the sophisticated martini-drinking intellectual we know and love. Originally, he was just going to be a regular dog who occasionally spoke. But MacFarlane decided that having a talking dog who acted completely normal would be funnier than having one who was still essentially just a pet. Speaking of Brian, here's a fact that might keep you thinking as you fall asleep. Brian Griffin is technically immortal in some episodes, but ages normally in others. The show has never been consistent about whether Brian ages like a regular dog or if he's somehow exempt from typical canine lifespans. In some episodes, he's mentioned to be around 7 years old in dog years, which would make him middle-aged. But in others, he references events from decades ago, as if he experienced them personally. This inconsistency is just one of many things that make Family Guy's continuity so fascinatingly chaotic. Now, let's talk about Stewie Griffin, the baby genius with questionable intentions. Did you know that Stewie's sexuality has been a subject of debate not just among fans but actually within the show's writing room? Seth MacFarlane has stated in interviews that Stewie is meant to be gay, but the character's sexuality has been portrayed inconsistently throughout the series. In early episodes, Stewie had crushes on various female characters, but later seasons have shown him with clear attractions to male characters. The writers have deliberately kept this ambiguous, which adds another layer to Stewie's already complex character. Here's something that might give you pleasant dreams. The voice actors for Family Guy are incredibly talented beyond. Did you know that his exact weight has been mentioned multiple times with wildly different numbers? In some episodes, he's said to weigh around 270 pounds, while in others, the number jumps to over 300. The inconsistency in any given episode. Peter's job history is another source of endless entertainment and confusion. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, various other random jobs, and has even been unemployed for extended periods. But here's what's interesting. The show never explains how the Griffin family maintains their lifestyle during Peter's unemployed periods. They live in a decent house in what appears to be a middle-class neighborhood, yet Peter's employment status seems to have no impact on their standard of living. It's one of those cartoon logic elements that you just have to accept. Speaking of the Griffin house, have you ever noticed that the layout seems to change between episodes? Sometimes there are rooms that appear out of nowhere, and other times, familiar rooms seem to vanish. The basement, in particular, seems to change size and purpose depending on the episode's needs. In some episodes, it's a small storage space, while in others, it's large enough to hold elaborate contraptions or even entire gatherings. This kind of flexible architecture is common in animated shows, but Family Guy takes it to particularly absurd lengths. Let's talk about Meg Griffin, the family's perpetual punching bag. Here's a fact that might surprise you. Meg was originally supposed to be the most normal character in the family, serving as the audience's point of view into this chaotic household. But as the show evolved, the writers found it funnier to make her the target of everyone's abuse. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by the time it was fully established, Meg had transformed from a relatable teenager into a character whose suffering was played for laughs. The voice of Meg has also changed throughout the series. Originally voiced by Lacey Chabert, the role was taken over by Mila Kunis starting in Season 2. The transition was so seamless that many viewers didn't even notice the change. Kunis was actually still a teenager when she started voicing Meg, making her closer in age to the character than most voice actors are to their animated counterparts. Here's a soothing fact about the show's animation style. Family Guy uses a technique called cutaway gags that allows for infinite creative possibilities. These brief segments, usually introduced by phrases like, "This is worse than the time," allow the animators to create completely different scenarios, time periods, and art styles within a single episode. Some of these cutaways reference obscure pop culture moments, while others create entirely fictional scenarios. The animators have said that creating these cutaways is one of the most enjoyable parts of working on the show because there are virtually no limitations on what they can create. Let's discuss some facts about Quahog, the fictional Rhode Island town where the Griffins live. The town's name is actually a type of clam, which is fitting given Rhode Island's coastal location. But here's what's interesting. The geography of Quahog seems to change depending on the episode's needs. Sometimes it's portrayed as a small town where everyone knows each other, while other times it seems large enough to support multiple shopping districts, airports, and major venues. The town has everything from a small town feel to big city amenities, depending on what the plot requires. The Drunken Clam, the bar where Peter and his friends hang out, is based on real bars that McFarlane frequented during his college years. The atmosphere and the type of conversations that happen there are drawn from McFarlane's actual experiences, which explains why the dialogue often feels so authentic despite the absurd situations. Here's something that might help you drift off. The show's theme song is intentionally designed to be catchy and memorable, but it's also shorter than most television theme songs. This was a deliberate choice to maximize the amount of time available for actual content in each episode. The brevity of the theme song allows for more jokes and story development, which is part of why Family Guy episodes often feel packed with content. Let's talk about some of the show's recurring characters and their origins. Glenn Quagmire, the Griffin's oversexed neighbor, was originally conceived as a minor character who would appear occasionally, but the writers found his character so entertaining that he became a regular part of the cast. His distinctive laugh and catchphrase, "giggity," weren't in the original character design, but developed naturally as the voice actor, Seth MacFarlane, experimented with the character's vocal patterns. Cleveland Brown, Peter's friend who eventually got his own spin-off show, was originally going to be a very different character. The writers initially conceived him as being more similar to Peter in personality, but they decided it would be funnier to make him the calm, rational member of the group. This decision led to Cleveland becoming the voice of reason among Peter's friends, often serving as a counterbalance to their more outrageous behavior. Joe Swanson, the paraplegic police officer, was created to add diversity to the show's cast, but the writers were careful to make his disability just one aspect of his character rather than his defining trait. In many episodes, Joe is the most competent and heroic character, often solving problems that the other characters can't handle. His wheelchair is rarely portrayed as a limitation, and he's often shown doing things that would be impossible for anyone, disabled or not. Here's a relaxing fact about the show's production schedule. Family Guy episodes are typically produced months in advance, which allows the animators and voice actors to take their time perfecting each episode. Unlike live-action shows that have to rush to meet weekly deadlines, animated shows like Family Guy can spend weeks on individual scenes, ensuring that every joke lands and every visual gag is perfectly timed. The show's writer's room operates on a collaborative system where anyone can contribute ideas, regardless of their official role on the show. This has led to some of the show's most memorable moments coming from unexpected sources. Sometimes the person responsible for continuity might suggest a joke that becomes central to an episode, or a voice actor might improvise a line that becomes a recurring catchphrase. Let's discuss some facts about the show's cultural impact that might give you something peaceful to think about as you fall asleep. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces the challenge of adapting American cultural references for international audiences. Some jokes that work perfectly in English become completely different jokes in other languages, while others are replaced entirely with references that local audiences will understand. The show's influence on internet culture has been enormous. Many of Family Guy's cutaway gags and memorable quotes have become memes that spread far beyond the show's original audience. The phrase, "oh no," in Peter's distinctive voice, for example, became a popular reaction GIF used in contexts that have nothing to do with the show itself. Here's something interesting about the show's approach to celebrity guest stars. Unlike many animated shows that cast celebrities to voice characters similar to themselves, Family Guy often has famous people voice characters that are completely different from their real personalities. This approach has led to some surprising and entertaining performances that showcase different sides of well-known actors and musicians. The show's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which actually makes it more relaxing to watch in some ways. You don't need to remember every detail from previous episodes to understand what's happening, because the show often contradicts its own established facts for the sake of a good joke. This means you can watch episodes in any order and still enjoy them fully, which is perfect for casual viewing or when you're trying to wind down. Let's talk about some facts about the show's music and sound design. Family Guy employs a full orchestra for many of its musical numbers, which is unusual for an animated television series. This attention to musical detail means that even throwaway songs and cutaway gags are often surprisingly well-produced and catchy. The show's composers have backgrounds in both television and theatrical music, which explains why many of the musical segments feel like they could work on stage. The sound effects in Family Guy are often created in unusual ways. The iconic sound of Peter falling down and hurting himself, which happens in almost every episode, is actually a combination of several different sounds layered together. The voice actors often provide their own sound effects during recording sessions, which gives the show a more organic feel than if all the sounds were added in post-production. Here's a fact that might help you smile as you drift off. The show's animators often hide small details in backgrounds that only the most observant viewers will notice. These Easter eggs can be anything from references to other shows, inside jokes among the production staff, or even tiny animations that have nothing to do with the main story. Finding these hidden details has become a hobby for some fans, who watch episodes multiple times just to catch things they missed. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the characters never seem to get older, the show acknowledges the passage of time in other ways. Technology updates, cultural references change, and real-world events are incorporated into episodes. This creates a strange temporal bubble where the characters exist in a perpetual present that somehow includes decades of cultural history. Let's discuss some production facts that showcase the incredible amount of work that goes into each episode. A single episode of Family Guy requires thousands of individual drawings, even though much of the animation is now done digitally. Each character expression, each background element, and each special effect needs to be designed and animated individually. The attention to detail is remarkable when you consider how quickly episodes need to be produced. The voice recording process is also more complex than you might expect. While Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, he rarely records them in conversation with each other during the same session. Instead, each character's lines are recorded separately, and the conversations are constructed in post-production. This means that MacFarlane has to imagine how his different characters would interact with each other and adjust his performance accordingly. Here's something soothing to consider. Despite all the chaos and controversy surrounding Family Guy, the show has created jobs for hundreds of people over its many seasons. Animators, voice actors, writers, musicians, sound engineers, and countless other professionals have built careers working on this show. In a way, all of this absurd humor has created a small community of creative people who work together to bring these ridiculous stories to life. The show's international success has also led to cultural exchange in unexpected ways. American animators have learned techniques from international studios, while animators from other countries have brought their own cultural perspectives to American television. This cross-pollination of ideas has enriched the medium of animation as a whole. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, let's consider something that might give you pleasant dreams. The show's enduring popularity suggests that there's something universally appealing about stories of dysfunctional families who, despite all their problems, somehow stick together. Even though the Griffin family is exaggerated to absurd proportions, there's something recognizable about their dynamics that resonates with audiences around the world. The show's ability to find humor in everyday situations, even when those situations are taken to impossible extremes, reflects a fundamentally optimistic view of life. No matter how bad things get, there's always something to laugh about. This perspective can be oddly comforting when you're trying to wind down from your own day's challenges. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, you can think about this wild, wonderful, and completely unpredictable animated world where anything can happen. where the impossible is routine, and where laughter is always just around the corner. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as a Quahog evening, minus all the explosions and chaos, of course. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who's just discovered these bizarre facts, I hope this journey through Family Guy's strange universe has given you something entertaining to think about as you fall asleep. Remember, in the world of animation, anything is possible, and tomorrow is just another opportunity for new adventures and unexpected laughs. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some late-night entertainment and your brain is ready to drift off into dreamland, I've got the perfect collection of wild Family Guy facts that'll either help you doze off peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this show even exists. Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, chaotic, and absolutely insane world of everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. Did you know that Peter Griffin has an astronomical body count that would make serial killers jealous? We're talking thousands of deaths, and honestly, most of them happened in the most ridiculous ways possible. This isn't your typical cartoon violence where characters bounce back with cartoon physics. Peter has legitimately caused more destruction than some natural disasters. Speaking of Peter's mayhem, his very first kill happened way back in the second episode of the entire series. Remember that Roadrunner from Looney Tunes? Yeah, Peter straight up ran that bird down with his car, flattening it completely. What makes this even funnier is Peter's reaction afterward, casually asking if he hit an ostrich while the Roadrunner is clearly pancaked on his windshield. This moment basically set the tone for everything that would follow in the series. But here's where things get really wild. Peter once literally took over Death's job in the show, and with that cosmic responsibility came the power to kill people just by touching them. During his stint as the Grim Reaper, he accidentally killed 2 airplane pilots mid-flight simply because he forgot to wear mittens. Can you imagine being a passenger on that plane? Thankfully, actress Karen Black was somehow there to land the aircraft, or everyone would have died in that crash too. The hospital incidents are particularly disturbing when you think about them. Peter somehow convinced people to let him work as a doctor, which is terrifying enough on its own, but then he actually killed a patient during what should have been a routine procedure. The patient even thanked Peter for saving his life right before dying, which adds this darkly comedic layer that only Family Guy could pull off. Here's a fact that might help you sleep better or give you nightmares, depending on your perspective. Peter once worked as a babysitter and literally left a baby to drown in a bathtub. He casually walked away, leaving behind drain cleaner in case of clogs, soap next to a radio, and towels on the roof. The complete negligence and absurdity of this situation perfectly captures Peter's character. He's simultaneously well-meaning and catastrophically incompetent. The show took Peter's violence to cinematic levels during various parody episodes. When they did their Kill Bill homage, Peter went full samurai warrior mode, engaging in what can only be described as a sword-fighting bloodbath. The choreography was surprisingly well animated for a show that usually relies on simple character movements, and Peter managed to take down 15 opponents all by himself in pure martial arts mayhem. Then there's Peter's brief career as a superhero parody called Red Stool, which was obviously their take on Deadpool. The name comes from the fact that his cancer specifically affected his rear end, because of course Family Guy would go there. As Red Stool, Peter maintained Deadpool's tendency for extreme violence, adding several more bodies to his ever-growing count while cracking inappropriate jokes the entire time. The Walter White parody deserves special mention because it perfectly captured the essence of Breaking Bad while maintaining Family Guy's signature chaos. Peter as Heisenberg was just as dangerous as the original, dropping bodies left and right while somehow making it comedically absurd rather than genuinely threatening. The transformation from bumbling father to calculating criminal mastermind was surprisingly well executed for a show known more for cutaway gags than character development. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Peter's violence is how it affects his own family. He once accidentally killed his entire family through carbon monoxide poisoning, and his reaction was essentially wondering if his day's work was worth it. Sure, they all came back in the next episode because cartoon logic, but the casual way Peter processes causing his loved ones' deaths is genuinely unsettling when you think about it too deeply. The fight scenes with Ernie the Giant Chicken are legendary among Family Guy fans, and for good reason. These battles have spanned multiple episodes and caused more collateral damage than most action movies. They've fought in airports, construction sites, moving trains, and even hijacked time machines to battle across different historical periods. The destruction they cause is absolutely massive, with buildings collapsing, vehicles exploding, and innocent bystanders getting caught in their ridiculous feud. What makes the chicken fights even more absurd is that they started over an expired coupon. Think about that for a moment. These two characters have caused thousands of deaths, millions of dollars in property damage, and untold chaos across multiple dimensions, all because of a disagreement about a coupon's validity. It's the perfect example of Family Guy's ability to take tiny conflicts and escalate them to world-ending proportions. The time travel elements in their fights add another layer of complexity and destruction. When Peter and Ernie crash through different time periods, they're not just affecting the present day, they're literally altering history itself. The poor driver of that futuristic train they destroyed was probably just trying to get to work in his cyberpunk timeline. And suddenly, he's vaporized because two idiots from the early 21st century decided to continue their grocery store dispute across the space-time continuum. Here's something that might surprise you. Peter has actually caused more deaths through his various acts of terrorism, albeit usually accidental ones. When he befriended a terrorist named Mahmoud, Peter was completely oblivious to what was happening. All he cared about was the attention and perks of his new friendship. When Mahmoud gave him what Peter thought was a phone, he kept trying to use it to make calls, not realizing it was actually a bomb detonator. The explosions that resulted from Peter's innocent phone calls were catastrophic. Each time he tried to dial Mahmoud, another building would explode somewhere in the city. The fact that Peter remained completely clueless about what was happening makes it both hilarious and terrifying. Even when the gang managed to stop Mahmoud's planned attack on a bridge, Peter still had that detonator and used it again while trying to call a restaurant for reservations. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcased Peter's destructive capabilities on an even grander scale. His fight with Homer Simpson leveled entire city blocks and resulted in mass casualties that would normally be associated with natural disasters or military conflicts. The two fathers' brawl started over Peter insulting The Simpsons show, which escalated into a city-destroying conflict that somehow ended with both characters gaining superpowers from radioactive waste. One particularly disturbing sequence involved Peter's brief stint as a high school student, where he arranged for a school shooting to get revenge on popular kids who ignored him. Even though he called it off at the last minute, the attack still went through, and the screams and gunshots in the background suggest multiple casualties among innocent children. This episode aired during a time when such events were unfortunately becoming more common in real life, making Peter's involvement even more unsettling. Peter's various explosions of hospitals deserve special mention for their sheer scale of destruction. When he disagreed with vaccines, he dressed as the Joker and blew up an entire medical facility just to prevent Stewie from getting a shot. The explosion was massive enough to level the building and likely killed dozens of patients, doctors, nurses, and staff members who were just trying to provide health care. But he didn't stop there. Peter later destroyed a children's hospital in another equally senseless act of destruction. The casual way the show presents these incidents, with Peter treating the explosions like minor inconveniences rather than mass casualty events, perfectly captures the dark comedy that Family Guy specializes in. It's simultaneously hilarious and deeply disturbing. The missile incidents showcase Peter's ability to cause destruction on a military scale. During his fight with President Trump, Peter's head got slammed onto a big red button that launched multiple missiles. Each missile likely killed hundreds of people in massive explosions, turning what started as a personal dispute into an international incident with catastrophic consequences. What's particularly interesting about Peter's character is how the show manages to make him sympathetic despite his astronomical body count. He's never intentionally malicious. He's just incredibly stupid and impulsive with access to dangerous situations. This combination makes him simultaneously lovable and terrifying, which is probably why the character has remained popular for over 2 decades. The physics of Peter's destruction often defy logic, even by cartoon standards. When he and Ernie crashed that Ferris wheel, it rolled through the city like a massive wheel of death, flattening everything in its path. The scale of destruction was apocalyptic, but it was presented with such absurd cartoon logic that viewers could laugh at it rather than being horrified by the implications. Peter's various career changes always seem to result in multiple casualties. Whether he's working as a doctor, babysitter, death himself, or any other profession, people end up dying as a direct result of his incompetence. It's actually impressive how consistently dangerous he is across all walks of life. There's literally no job safe enough for Peter Griffin to perform without causing fatalities. The show's commitment to continuity regarding Peter's violence is surprisingly strong for a series that usually ignores consequences. Characters who die in one episode rarely come back, unless there's a specific plot reason, and the destruction Peter causes often gets referenced in later episodes. This attention to detail makes his actions feel more impactful than typical cartoon violence. Here's a fun sleeping fact. The total estimated death toll directly caused by Peter Griffin throughout the series is approaching 3,000 people. That number includes direct kills, collateral damage from his fights, explosions he's caused, and various accidents resulting from his stupidity. To put that in perspective, Peter has personally caused more deaths than many historical disasters. The international incidents Peter has triggered would realistically make him one of the most wanted criminals on the planet. He's blown up bridges, destroyed government buildings, launched military missiles, and caused diplomatic crises with multiple countries. Yet somehow he continues living his normal suburban life without any legal consequences, which is perhaps the most unrealistic aspect of a show featuring a talking baby and a martini-drinking dog. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the Family Guy universe, Peter Griffin is probably causing another catastrophe that will add to his ever-growing body count. Sweet dreams, and maybe avoid any neighborhoods where middle-aged men are having disputes with large poultry. In the world of Family Guy, such conflicts have a tendency to escalate into city-leveling disasters that make natural catastrophes look like minor inconveniences. The beautiful absurdity of Peter's character is that despite being responsible for more destruction than most fictional supervillains, he's still somehow the protagonist we're supposed to root for. That's the magic of Family Guy, taking the most inappropriate situations and making them laugh out loud funny through sheer audacity and perfect comedic timing. Now close your eyes and let these wonderfully bizarre facts carry you off into dreamland, where hopefully giant chickens and expired coupons can't hurt you. Hey sleepyheads, if you're settling in for the night and need something to drift off to, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy, with some absolutely wild facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up, wondering how the heck this show got away with some of this stuff. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll have enough random Family Guy knowledge to impress literally no one at parties. But hey, that's what we're here for. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that Peter Griffin has technically been married to Lois longer in real time than some actual married couples have been together? The show premiered in 1999, which means Peter and Lois have been cartoon married for over 25 years now. That's longer than a lot of Hollywood marriages last. And considering all the ridiculous stuff Peter puts Lois through, it's honestly impressive she hasn't left him for someone with at least 2 functioning brain cells. Speaking of Peter's questionable decision-making skills, here's a fact that might make you question everything you thought you knew about the show. Peter Griffin has actually cheated on Lois multiple times throughout the series, but not always in the way you'd expect. There was that whole episode where Peter literally got injected with what the doctors called a gay gene during a medical experiment. Now, I know what you're thinking, and yes, this is as ridiculous as it sounds. Peter needed money for medical bills, saw an ad for volunteers for medical research, and being Peter, he didn't ask any questions before signing up. The doctors at this research facility were apparently working on some kind of gene therapy, and Peter ended up getting injected with this experimental serum that was supposed to make him gay. The kicker? He only did it because they offered him $125. That's right, Peter Griffin's sexuality was temporarily altered, for the price of a decent vacuum cleaner. Only on Family Guy would someone's entire identity shift because of what amounts to pocket change. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once the serum kicked in, Peter didn't just become gay, he became like stereotypically gay. We're talking about a guy who suddenly knew all the best brunch spots in town and started making homemade muffins. Lois was initially upset about the whole situation until she tasted those muffins, and then she was suddenly okay with having a gay husband. It's like she discovered the secret to getting Peter to actually contribute to household duties was a medical experiment gone wrong. The really wild part is that Peter ended up getting a boyfriend named Scott, and he was completely ready to leave his entire family for this guy. Peter literally told Lois he was leaving her for his new soulmate, packed his bags, and started living his best gay life. They went to fancy restaurants, which is probably more romantic attention than Lois had gotten in years, and Peter was genuinely happy. The effects were supposed to wear off eventually, but nobody knew when. The doctor said it could be anywhere from a week to a year, which is quite possibly the most unhelpful medical diagnosis in television history. Meanwhile, Brian and Stewie decided they needed to fix this situation, so they sent Peter to what was essentially conversion therapy, which obviously didn't work. Scott got worried when Peter disappeared for 2 days and showed up at the Griffin house looking for him. When Lois found out what Brian had done, she wasn't happy, and they all rushed to rescue Peter from this ridiculous straight camp. Here's the kicker, though. When Peter and Scott were finally reunited, Scott had a special surprise planned. Remember how Peter had mentioned that his ultimate fantasy was to have an 11-way? Well, Scott made that happen. Can you imagine being in Peter's shoes when the effects finally wore off after 2.5 weeks? The man went from living his best life to probably needing serious therapy. But that wasn't even the only time Peter stepped out on his marriage. There was another incident involving his special mirrored sunglasses that accidentally revealed he was getting calls from a secret boyfriend. Peter was playing poker, and because he's Peter, he was wearing these ridiculous sunglasses that basically showed everyone his cards. But that wasn't even the stupidest part. When his phone rang during the game, everyone could see in his sunglasses that the contact was saved as his secret boyfriend. The man literally had no concept of how to keep a secret. Peter's excuse for taking the call? He told everyone it was his wife. Smooth, Peter. Real smooth. This is the same guy who somehow managed to maintain an entire second family in Chicago. That's right. Peter Griffin had a whole other life where he pretended to be the mother of someone else's children. He would tell his real family he was going on business trips, fly to Chicago, change clothes in a taxi, and then show up at this other house where a bunch of kids would greet him like he was their mom. I have so many questions about this arrangement that I don't think I want answered. Like, whose kids were those? How did this living situation even come about? And most importantly, how did Peter manage to keep this secret when he couldn't even hide a boyfriend's contact information on his phone? The man's inconsistency is honestly impressive. Then there was the time Peter got amnesia and forgot he was married to Lois entirely. This happened when the Griffin family somehow ended up on Family Feud, because of course they did. Peter got into a fight with Richard Dawson, which honestly seems about right for Peter's personality, and ended up flying headfirst into a table. The impact gave him complete amnesia, and he had no idea who Lois or his kids were. The doctor said Peter's memory could come back anywhere from days to years, which again, super helpful medical advice. Lois tried everything to jog his memory, including showing him old home movies, but Peter just got distracted by random things in the background. The man's attention span was somehow even worse with amnesia than it was normally. Here's where things got weird, though. Peter might not have remembered being married to Lois, but some things about his personality remained intact, like the fact that he was a complete pervert. He started creeping on Lois, not realizing she was actually his wife and that he could just ask her to sleep with him. When Lois explained the situation, Peter was over the moon. He basically got to lose his virginity all over again, except this time with someone who actually knew what they were doing. But Peter's amnesia brain didn't quite understand the boundaries of marriage. He seemed to think that if he could sleep with Lois, he could probably sleep with anyone in the house. This led to Lois having to explain, in the most awkward way possible, that he couldn't have relations with the kids. That's a sentence no parent should ever have to say. But then again, this is Peter Griffin we're talking about. The amnesia situation got even more complicated when Peter decided he didn't want to be married anymore. He thought the whole concept was stupid and decided to become a bachelor. So suddenly, Lois and the kids were kicked out of their own house and had to move to a crappy apartment in the city, while Peter lived it up as a single man. He was throwing parties, bringing home different women every night, and generally living like he was 25 years old instead of a middle-aged father of 3. The really messed up part is that Peter got his memory back after about a day, but he decided to keep pretending he had amnesia because he was enjoying the bachelor lifestyle too much. Meanwhile, Quagmire was making moves on Lois in her vulnerable state, and Brian had to rush to tell Peter what was happening. Peter finally confessed that his memory had returned, but only because he didn't want Quagmire sleeping with his wife. The fact that he was willing to abandon his family for random hookups but drew the line at Quagmire says a lot about Peter's priorities. One of the most bizarre cheating incidents involved Peter falling in love with a cardboard cutout. This wasn't some quick gag either. Peter literally brought home a cardboard stand-up of model Kathy Ireland and treated it like a real relationship. He introduced the cutout to his kids, took it out to dinner, and somehow managed to have what he considered a physical relationship with it. The logistics of this situation are something I don't think anyone wants to think too hard about. Peter was so committed to this cardboard romance that he told his kids Kathy was their new mom. Lois was still living in the house and honestly seemed pretty unbothered by the whole thing. She figured it would blow over eventually, and she was probably right, except that Chris decided to take Kathy into his room for his own purposes. When Peter found out, he was so angry that he shook the cutout, and her cardboard head literally fell off, ending the relationship in the most anticlimactic way possible. The show also had this meta episode where they pretended to show behind-the-scenes footage of the Family Guy cast, and in this fake documentary, we found out that Peter was supposedly cheating on Lois with an 18-year-old intern. When confronted about the naked pictures on his phone, Peter's excuse was that his phone number used to belong to the intern's ex-boyfriend, so the pictures were sent by mistake. Then, when pressed further, he claimed it was the cloud's fault. The cloud people. Peter Griffin blamed technology for his infidelity. What made this even worse was that Lois revealed this had happened 5 times, and some of the pictures actually had Peter in them too. At this point, you have to wonder about Lois's self-respect. But then again, she's been putting up with Peter's nonsense for over 2 decades. So maybe she's just developed an immunity to his stupidity. Throughout all of these incidents, there's this running theme of Peter having absolutely no understanding of how relationships work. Whether he's temporarily gay, suffering from amnesia, or falling in love with cardboard, he consistently makes choices that any reasonable person would recognize as relationship ending. Yet somehow, Lois always takes him back, and they return to their dysfunctional but apparently unbreakable marriage. The fascinating thing about Peter's various infidelities is how they reflect different aspects of his character. When he's gay, he becomes more thoughtful and domestic. When he has amnesia, his base instincts take over. When he's with the cardboard cutout, it shows his complete detachment from reality. Each scenario reveals something different about what makes Peter tick, even if none of it makes him a better husband. What's really interesting is how the show treats these situations as comedy rather than serious relationship problems. In real life, most of these incidents would result in divorce, therapy, or at minimum, some serious conversations about boundaries and commitment. But in the Family Guy universe, they're just Tuesday. Peter can maintain a secret family, inject himself with experimental drugs, or forget his wife exists entirely, and by the end of the episode, everything goes back to normal. This reflects the show's overall approach to continuity and consequences. Family Guy operates in a world where actions don't have lasting impact, where characters can experience major life changes that are completely forgotten by the next episode. It's part of what allows the show to push boundaries and explore ridiculous scenarios without worrying about long-term narrative consistency. The fact that Peter has cheated on Lois in so many different ways also highlights the show's commitment to mining comedy from uncomfortable situations. Seth MacFarlane and the writing team seem to delight in finding new ways to make Peter an even worse husband, while somehow keeping him sympathetic enough that audiences don't completely turn against him. And there you have it, folks. Peter Griffin's extensive history of marital infidelity, from gay gene experiments to cardboard cutout romances. Sweet dreams. And try not to think too hard about the logistics of any of this. If you enjoyed learning about Peter's questionable relationship choices, make sure to subscribe for more random animated facts that serve no practical purpose but might help you fall asleep. Until next time, keep it weird, keep it random, and remember that somewhere out there, Peter Griffin is probably doing something that would end most marriages but will be completely forgotten by next episode. Did you know that Peter Griffin once spent over 20 minutes trying to remember if he locked his car, only to realize he doesn't actually own a car? Or that there's an episode where he becomes convinced his shadow is following him around? Welcome to the world of Family Guy, where the most bizarre situations somehow become comedy gold. I'm about to share some of the most mind-bending, sleep-inducing facts about this animated chaos that might just surprise you. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that Peter Griffin has died more times than any other main character on Family Guy? We're talking about legitimate deaths here, not just close calls or fake-outs. Throughout the series, Peter's been killed by everything from falling pianos to alien invasions. Yet somehow, he always manages to come back in the next scene, like nothing happened. The writers have never officially explained this phenomenon, leading to fan theories that range from Peter being immortal to the entire show taking place in some sort of cartoon purgatory. Here's another weird one that might help you drift off to sleep. Peter's weight has been officially listed as anywhere between 270 pounds to over 400 pounds, depending on which episode guide you're reading. But here's the kicker. In one episode, they actually show Peter stepping on a scale that reads -5 pounds. The joke was that he was so full of hot air that he defied the laws of physics. This kind of absurd humor is exactly what makes Family Guy so uniquely ridiculous. Speaking of Peter's physical characteristics, his age is another mystery that changes depending on who's writing the episode. He's been anywhere from 39 to 45 years old throughout the series. But in one memorable episode, they reveal that Peter doesn't actually know his own birthday. He's been celebrating it on the wrong day for years because he misread his birth certificate. When Lois finally corrects him, Peter insists on having a do-over birthday party, complete with all the presents he should have received on his actual birthday for the past decade. Now here's something that might surprise you about the show's production. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally supposed to be recurring segments. The first fight scene was meant to be a one-off joke, but it tested so well with audiences that the writers decided to bring it back. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes and involve massive property damage across multiple city blocks, have become some of the most expensive animated sequences to produce on television. Each chicken fight costs more to animate than entire episodes of some other shows. Let me tell you about Peter's job situation, which is honestly more confusing than quantum physics. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, his own fishing boat business, and even briefly as a bodyguard for a pop star. But here's the thing that'll keep you puzzling as you fall asleep. Sometimes within the same season, the show will contradict itself about where Peter works. In one episode, he'll be complaining about his boss at the brewery, and in the very next episode, he's somehow back at the toy factory with no explanation whatsoever. The Griffin family house itself is another source of endless continuity errors that hardcore fans love to debate. The layout of the house changes constantly throughout the series. Sometimes there are 4 bedrooms upstairs, sometimes 3. The basement has appeared on both the left and right sides of the house in different episodes. Most bizarrely, there was one episode where they showed a second staircase that had never existed before and has never been seen since. It's like the house exists in its own dimension, where architecture is more of a suggestion than a rule. Here's a fact that might make you chuckle as you're trying to fall asleep. Peter Griffin holds the record for the most words spoken per minute in any animated television series. During his fastest rapid-fire dialogue sequence, he spoke over 400 words in 60 seconds. The voice actor, Seth MacFarlane, had to practice that particular monologue for weeks to get it right. And even then, they had to record it in multiple takes and edit them together digitally. The show's relationship with censorship has always been interesting. But did you know that there are entire episodes that have been completely banned from certain countries? Not just edited or censored, but completely prohibited from airing. These episodes aren't necessarily the ones you'd expect either. Sometimes it's because of obscure cultural references that were considered offensive, or because of background details that viewers in certain regions found problematic. There's apparently a whole vault of Family Guy content that most of the world will never see. Peter's relationship with food deserves its own documentary series. Throughout the show, he's eaten everything from expired milk that was older than Meg to a sandwich so large it required a forklift to deliver. But the most impressive feat was when he ate an entire Thanksgiving dinner, including the table it was served on, in under 3 minutes. This wasn't even treated as particularly unusual by his family, who just went ahead and ordered pizza instead. The voice acting for Peter involves more physical comedy than you might expect. Seth MacFarlane actually acts out many of Peter's movements while recording his lines, which is why the character's gestures often seem so natural and expressive. During particularly energetic scenes, McFarlane has been known to sweat through multiple shirts in a single recording session. He's also injured himself several times while getting too into character, including once throwing out his back during a particularly enthusiastic laugh sequence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Many of Peter's most memorable one-liners were actually improvised during recording sessions. The writers would provide the basic structure of a scene, but they'd leave room for McFarlane to add his own comedic touches. Some of these improvised moments became so popular with fans that they were later incorporated into the show's official mythology. The Griffin family car has been destroyed and mysteriously repaired more times than any other vehicle in television history. We're talking about complete destruction here. Blown up, crushed by giant robots, eaten by sea monsters, you name it. Yet somehow, it always appears good as new in the next scene. The car itself is supposed to be a mid-'80s sedan, but its exact make and model changes from episode to episode. Sometimes it's a Honda, sometimes it's a Ford, and occasionally it's a completely fictional brand that doesn't exist in real life. Peter's medical history reads like something out of a medical textbook written by someone who's never been to medical school. He's survived diseases that don't exist, undergone surgeries that are physically impossible, and been treated by doctors who clearly got their degrees from the back of a cereal box. In one episode, he's diagnosed with a condition where his bones are apparently made of rubber, which somehow makes him both incredibly flexible and completely indestructible. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the Simpson family has remained the same age for decades, the Griffins seem to exist in a temporal bubble where sometimes years pass and sometimes they don't. Stewie has been a baby for over 20 years of real time. But there have been episodes where characters reference events from their past that would require them to have aged significantly. Here's a production detail that might interest you as you're winding down for the night. The animators have developed an entire catalog of Peter's facial expressions that numbers in the thousands. Each expression is carefully categorized by emotion, intensity, and context. There's apparently an expression called Peter confused by technology that gets used at least once per episode, and another one called Peter realizing he's made a terrible mistake. That's practically the show's trademark look. The Griffin family's financial situation is another source of endless mystery. Despite Peter's various job situations and questionable work ethic, the family somehow maintains a middle-class lifestyle in a decent neighborhood. They've been shown to be both desperately broke and surprisingly wealthy, sometimes within the same episode. Peter once claimed to have no money for groceries while simultaneously planning an expensive vacation to Europe. Peter's relationship with technology provides some of the show's most relatable comedy, especially for anyone who's ever struggled with modern gadgets. He's been defeated by everything from automatic doors to digital clocks. There was one memorable episode where he spent the entire runtime trying to figure out how to change the channel on a television remote, only to discover at the end that the TV wasn't even plugged in. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years, but Peter's character design has remained remarkably consistent. The animators have stated that his round shape and simple features make him one of the easier characters to draw, which is ironic considering how complex his personality has become over the years. His iconic green pants and white shirt combination was originally chosen because those colors were easy to reproduce consistently in animation. Here's something that might make you smile as you're drifting off. Peter Griffin has inadvertently solved more crimes than most actual detectives on television, not through any kind of investigative skill, mind you, but through sheer dumb luck and his tendency to stumble into situations where criminals just happen to confess everything to him. He's uncovered everything from art theft rings to international espionage operations, usually while just trying to buy a sandwich or find a bathroom. The character's impact on popular culture extends far beyond the show itself. Peter's laugh has been sampled in music tracks. His catchphrases have entered everyday vocabulary, and his image has appeared on everything from t-shirts to coffee mugs. There's even been academic papers written about his role as a representation of American masculinity in the 21st century, which is probably something Peter himself would find hilariously pretentious. Peter's driving skills, or complete lack thereof, deserve special mention. He's been responsible for more animated car accidents than any other cartoon character in history. The Department of Motor Vehicles in the show's universe has apparently given up on revoking his license, instead just accepting that Peter Griffin behind the wheel is simply a force of nature that must be endured. The show's writers have admitted that they sometimes write episodes specifically around Peter's most ridiculous character traits. There are entire plot lines that exist solely because someone in the writer's room wondered what would happen if Peter tried to do something completely ordinary, like go grocery shopping or attend a parent-teacher conference, and inevitably turned it into a disaster of epic proportions. As we wrap up this collection of Family Guy facts, here's one final detail that perfectly captures the show's absurdist spirit. In the show's internal logic, Peter Griffin is simultaneously the most incompetent person alive and somehow capable of surviving situations that would destroy normal human beings. He's a character who can't figure out how to use a can opener, but can somehow survive being hit by a train. He's confused by basic mathematics, but has accidentally invented several revolutionary technologies while trying to fix his toaster. These contradictions aren't bugs in the show's writing, they're features. Family Guy exists in a universe where logic is optional and consistency is overrated. Peter Griffin embodies this philosophy perfectly, being both completely relatable and utterly impossible at the same time. Whether that helps you fall asleep or keeps you awake wondering about the nature of animated reality is entirely up to you. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, even the most ridiculous facts somehow make perfect sense, which might be the most ridiculous fact of all. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice, and somehow clawed its way back from television death each time? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre world behind one of the most controversial animated shows ever created. And trust me, the stories I'm about to share will blow your mind. From secret celebrity cameos that never made it to air, to the shocking real-life inspiration behind Stewie's character, we're uncovering Family Guy secrets that even die-hard fans have never heard before. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how close we came to never having Family Guy at all. Back in 1999, when Seth MacFarlane pitched his idea to Fox executives, he was so broke he was literally sleeping on a friend's couch in Los Angeles. The pilot episode cost over $2 million to produce, making it one of the most expensive animated pilots in television history at that time. And here's the kicker. Fox almost passed on it completely because they thought it was too similar to The Simpsons. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has a background that's absolutely fascinating and explains so much about the show's unique humor. He actually started working in animation when he was just 18 years old, creating a thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design that would later become the blueprint for Family Guy. That student film, which you can still find online today, featured early versions of Peter, Lois, and their dog Brian, though they looked quite different from what we know now. What most people don't realize is that MacFarlane does the voices for 4 main characters on the show. He's not just Peter Griffin, but also Brian the dog, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. The interesting part is how he developed each voice. Peter's voice was inspired by a security guard MacFarlane knew who had a thick Rhode Island accent. Brian's voice is essentially MacFarlane's natural speaking voice, while Stewie was originally supposed to sound like Rex Harrison from My Fair Lady, though it evolved into something completely different over time. Speaking of Stewie, here's something that might surprise you. The character was initially written as a one-dimensional villain baby who wanted to kill his mother and take over the world. MacFarlane has admitted in interviews that Stewie's sexuality was deliberately kept ambiguous for years, and the writers would often joke about it in the writer's room. The character's development into a more complex, often effeminate, genius baby happened gradually over several seasons, and it wasn't planned from the beginning. The show's relationship with censorship has been absolutely wild from day one. There's an entire archive of Family Guy scenes that were deemed too controversial for broadcast television. One episode had a joke about the September 11th attacks that was removed before airing, and another had a sequence involving Mickey Mouse that Disney's lawyers shut down faster than you could say copyright infringement. The writers have always pushed boundaries, sometimes successfully, and sometimes not so much. Here's where things get really interesting. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox executives thought that was the end of it. But something unprecedented happened in television history. The show found a massive second life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim programming block. The DVD sales were so strong that they actually outsold many primetime dramas that were still on the air. This success story became a case study in how a show could resurrect itself through alternative distribution methods. The fan campaign to bring the show back was unlike anything television had seen before. This was before social media as we know it today, so fans organized through message boards, early blogs, and even physical petitions. They sent thousands of letters to Fox executives, and some fans even sent baby bottles and diapers as a reference to Stewie. The campaign worked, and in 2005, Family Guy returned for a fourth season, making it one of the first canceled shows to be revived due to fan demand and DVD sales. But then lightning struck twice, and the show was canceled again in 2002 and brought back again in 2005, making it the first show in television history to be canceled and revived twice. This second cancellation and revival story is even more dramatic than the first. The show's ratings had dipped during its third season, and Fox executives felt it had run its course. However, the DVD sales for the first 3 seasons were so astronomical that they couldn't ignore the numbers. The voice acting process for Family Guy is absolutely fascinating and different from most animated shows. Unlike many animated series where actors record their lines separately, the main Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates a more natural flow of dialogue and allows for improvisation that you can sometimes hear in the final episodes. Seth MacFarlane has said that some of the funniest moments in the show came from spontaneous interactions during these group recording sessions. One of the most mind-blowing facts about the show involves the famous chicken fight scenes between Peter Griffin and Ernie the giant chicken. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes, actually cost more to animate than entire episodes of some other animated shows. The animators have to create detailed fight choreography, multiple background locations, and complex character movements. MacFarlane has joked that these scenes are his way of burning through the show's animation budget in the most entertaining way possible. The show's cutaway gags, which are basically mini-sketches that interrupt the main storyline, weren't originally part of the show's format. They were added during the second season as a way to incorporate more jokes and references that didn't fit naturally into the main plot. These cutaways became so popular that they essentially became the show's signature style, influencing countless other animated comedies that followed. Family Guy has had some absolutely incredible celebrity guest stars over the years, but many people don't know about the ones who almost appeared but didn't. Michael Jackson was reportedly interested in doing a voice on the show in the early 2000s, but legal complications prevented it from happening. Similarly, several A-list actors have recorded guest appearances that were later cut from episodes due to various reasons, from scheduling conflicts to content concerns. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy references and memes have become part of everyday internet language. Phrases like, "that really grinds my gears," and "giggity" have entered the cultural lexicon. The show has been referenced in academic papers about humor, animation, and cultural commentary. Some universities have actually used Family Guy episodes as case studies in media studies courses. Here's something that might keep you up thinking about it. The show has predicted several real-world events with uncanny accuracy. There's an episode from 2005 that jokes about Kevin Spacey in a way that seems eerily prescient given later revelations about the actor. Another episode made jokes about certain political figures that seemed outlandish at the time but became remarkably relevant years later. Whether these are coincidences or the writers having incredible insight into human nature is up for debate. The international versions of Family Guy are absolutely wild and worth exploring if you're curious about cultural adaptation. The show has been dubbed into dozens of languages, and each version has had to navigate different cultural sensitivities and humor styles. The German version, for example, had to completely rewrite many jokes because direct translations didn't make sense or weren't funny in that cultural context. Some countries have banned certain episodes entirely while embracing others. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has been fascinating to watch evolve over the years. Initially, there was definitely some tension, with Simpsons creator Matt Groening making pointed comments about Family Guy being derivative. However, this led to one of the most brilliant crossover episodes in animated television history, where the two families actually met and interacted. The production of this crossover episode required unprecedented cooperation between two different animation studios and networks. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates differently from most television shows. The writers often compete to see who can come up with the most outrageous or offensive joke, with the understanding that most of these will never make it to air. This competitive atmosphere has created some of the show's most memorable moments, but it's also led to some jokes that had to be completely rewritten or abandoned during the production process. The show's approach to social and political commentary has evolved significantly over its run. Early episodes were primarily focused on absurd humor and pop culture references, but later seasons began incorporating more direct political satire and social commentary. This evolution has been both praised and criticized, with some fans preferring the original format and others appreciating the show's willingness to tackle serious topics through humor. MacFarlane's decision to step back from day-to-day involvement in the show after several seasons was a turning point that many fans noticed. His reduced involvement allowed other writers and producers to put their stamp on the show, leading to subtle but noticeable changes in humor, style, and character development. This transition period created some of the most experimental episodes in the show's history. The merchandising empire that Family Guy has built is absolutely staggering. From action figures to clothing lines, from video games to board games, the show has spawned an entire industry of products. Some of the most interesting merchandise includes items that reference the show's most obscure jokes, suggesting that the creators understand their audience's deep knowledge of the series. As we wind down our journey through these fascinating Family Guy facts, it's worth reflecting on how this show that almost never existed became such a cultural phenomenon. From sleeping on couches to creating a multi-million-dollar franchise, from cancellation to resurrection, from controversy to cultural impact, Family Guy represents something unique in entertainment history. The show continues to evolve and surprise audiences, and who knows what wild facts we'll be sharing about it in another 20 years. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere out there, Seth MacFarlane is probably working on another joke that will either make you laugh until you cry or shake your head in disbelief. Possibly both at the same time. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and you stumble across something so unexpectedly fascinating that you forget you were even tired? Well, tonight we're diving deep into the chaotic, bizarre, and surprisingly complex world of Peter Griffin from Family Guy. And trust me, by the time we're done unraveling his entire story, you'll understand why this seemingly simple cartoon dad is actually one of television's most intricate characters. Most people think they know Peter Griffin. Fat guy, drinks beer, fights a giant chicken, right? Wrong. What if I told you that Peter's backstory involves multiple identities, time travel, alternate dimensions, and a family tree so twisted it makes soap operas look straightforward? What if I told you that this bumbling father figure has actually died and been resurrected more times than most comic book heroes? Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let me paint you the complete picture of Peter Griffin's existence, from his mysterious birth to his countless near-death experiences, and everything in between. Because once you see the full scope of his story, Family Guy will never look the same again. Let's start at the very beginning, because Peter's origin story is far more complex than you might imagine. Peter Justin Griffin wasn't always a Griffin. He was born Peter McFinnigan in Mexico, though the circumstances of his birth are shrouded in mystery and contradiction. His biological father, Francis Griffin, was an ultra-religious Irish Catholic man whose stern demeanor would later shape much of Peter's rebellious adult personality. But here's where things get interesting. Peter spent his early childhood believing he was Irish, embracing this identity with the kind of enthusiasm only a child can muster. However, his world was turned upside down when he discovered through a series of revelations that his heritage was far more complicated than he ever imagined. The man he thought was his father figure, Francis, represented everything Peter would grow to rebel against: rigid religious doctrine, conservative values, and an inability to express joy or spontaneity. This early trauma of identity confusion would follow Peter throughout his entire life. Think about it. How many episodes revolve around Peter discovering something new about his past or his identity? It's not coincidence. It's the fundamental driving force of his character. He's constantly searching for who he really is, because his foundation was built on uncertainty. Peter's adoption by the Griffin family brought him to Rhode Island, specifically to the fictional town of Quahog. Now, Quahog itself is practically a character in Peter's story. This small New England town serves as both his sanctuary and his prison. It's where he's built his adult life, but it's also where he's trapped in cycles of behavior that prevent him from growing beyond his teenage mentality. The Griffin household on Spooner Street became Peter's universe, and understanding the dynamics of this home is crucial to understanding Peter himself. His relationship with his adoptive family shaped his approach to his own family later in life. The lack of a strong father figure during his formative years explains so much about his parenting style with his own children. Speaking of his children, let's talk about Peter as a father, because this is where his story becomes truly complex. Meg, Chris, and Stewie Griffin represent three different aspects of Peter's own personality reflected back at him. Meg embodies his insecurities and need for acceptance, which is why he treats her so harshly. He's rejecting the parts of himself he dislikes most. Chris represents his simple, well-meaning nature, which is why Peter can sometimes be genuinely caring toward him. And Stewie? Stewie represents Peter's intelligence and ambition, the parts of himself he never developed or explored. The way Peter interacts with each child tells us more about his internal psychology than any therapy session could. When he's cruel to Meg, he's being cruel to his own perceived inadequacies. When he's protective of Chris, he's protecting his own innocence. And when he's bewildered by Stewie, he's confronting the intellectual potential he never realized. Then there's Lois. And oh boy, is their relationship a masterclass in dysfunction disguised as sitcom comedy. Lois Pewterschmidt Griffin comes from wealth and privilege, everything Peter never had growing up. Their marriage represents Peter's ultimate conquest. He managed to win over someone completely out of his league, but it also represents his greatest fear, that he's not worthy of love or success. Peter's constant need to prove himself worthy of Lois drives many of his most outrageous schemes and adventures. Every time he starts a business, learns a new skill, or attempts to become famous, he's really trying to prove that Lois was right to choose him. The fact that she stays with him despite his countless failures isn't just comedy gold, it's the foundation of Peter's entire worldview. Now let's talk about Peter's professional life, because his career history reads like a resume from an alternate dimension. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, tried his hand at entertainment, and held countless other jobs. Each career change represents Peter's ongoing search for his true calling, his desperate attempt to find something that gives his life meaning beyond just being a husband and father. The Pawtucket Patriot Brewery isn't just where Peter works, it's where he found his tribe. His friendship with Glenn Quagmire, Cleveland Brown, and Joe Swanson represents the family he chose for himself. These relationships are arguably the most stable and consistent in his entire life. While his family relationships are complicated by obligation and expectation, his friendships exist purely because he enjoys these people's company. But here's what's fascinating about Peter's friend group: they're all fundamentally broken in their own ways, just like him. Quagmire's hypersexuality, Cleveland's passive nature, and Joe's physical limitations all serve as mirrors for different aspects of Peter's own struggles with masculinity, ambition, and physical insecurity. The infamous chicken fights with Ernie the Giant Chicken deserve special attention because they represent something deeper than just absurd comedy. These epic battles symbolize Peter's relationship with obstacles in general. Instead of finding reasonable solutions to problems, Peter's instinct is to meet challenges head-on with disproportionate force and stubbornness. The chicken fights are metaphors for how Peter approaches every conflict in his life, with excessive energy, poor planning, and a refusal to back down even when he's clearly outmatched. Peter's death and resurrection experiences are another crucial element of his story that often gets overlooked. He's technically died multiple times throughout the series, only to return as if nothing happened. These deaths aren't just reset buttons for the show. They represent Peter's resilience and his refusal to let anything, including mortality, keep him down. Each resurrection reinforces his belief that he's somehow special, somehow protected, which feeds into his often reckless behavior. The alternate timeline and dimension episodes reveal even more about Peter's character. When we see versions of Peter from different realities, we're seeing the paths his life could have taken under different circumstances. Some versions are more successful, others are more tragic, but they're all recognizably Peter at their core. This suggests that regardless of circumstances, certain aspects of his personality are fundamental and unchangeable. Peter's relationship with authority figures throughout the series follows a consistent pattern that traces back to his complicated relationship with his biological father, Francis. Whether he's dealing with his boss, Mr. Weed, later Angela, or any government official, Peter's default response is rebellion. He can't help but challenge authority, not because he has a well-reasoned philosophical objection to hierarchy, but because authority reminds him of the rigid control he experienced in his early religious upbringing. His various business ventures and get-rich-quick schemes reveal Peter's deep-seated belief that success should come easily. This isn't just laziness. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how achievement works, likely stemming from his upbringing where religious doctrine promised rewards for faith rather than effort. Peter applies this same magical thinking to business, relationships, and personal growth. The running gags and catchphrases that define Peter aren't just comedy elements, they're coping mechanisms. His nigh-he-he-he laugh, his random pop culture references, and his tendency to break into song are all ways he deflects serious, emotional moments. Peter uses humor as a shield against having to confront the deeper issues in his life. Peter's body image and relationship with food tell another important part of his story. His weight isn't just a visual gag. It represents his relationship with comfort and self-control. Food is Peter's primary source of comfort, his go-to solution for stress, boredom, and emotional pain. His eating habits are directly tied to his emotional state, which is why dramatic moments in his life often involve food in some way. The flashback episodes that show Peter at different ages reveal how his core personality traits were established early and have remained remarkably consistent. Young Peter displays the same impulsiveness, the same need for attention, and the same difficulty with authority that define adult Peter. This consistency suggests that Peter's behavior isn't really about his circumstances. It's about deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and responding to the world. Peter's occasional moments of genuine wisdom and insight are perhaps the most revealing aspects of his character. When he drops his usual antics and speaks from the heart, we see glimpses of the person he could be if he wasn't so afraid of being vulnerable. These moments are rare, but they show that Peter's intelligence and emotional capacity are much greater than his usual behavior suggests. His relationship with popular culture and media consumption reflects modern society's relationship with information and entertainment. Peter absorbs pop culture references without really understanding their context or meaning, much like how many people today consume information. He's a character designed for the internet age, even though he was created before social media existed. The international episodes where Peter travels to different countries reveal his American-centric worldview, while also showing his capacity to adapt when forced out of his comfort zone. These adventures don't fundamentally change him, but they do show that he's capable of growth when his usual coping mechanisms aren't available. Peter's various nemesis throughout the series, from the chicken to his own father to random authority figures, all represent different aspects of his internal struggles. He's not really fighting these external enemies. He's fighting parts of himself that he can't accept or integrate. As we wrap up this deep dive into Peter Griffin's complete story, it's important to recognize that his character represents something universal about the human experience. We all struggle with identity. We all rebel against aspects of our upbringing. We all fear that we're not worthy of the love we've received, and we all use various coping mechanisms to avoid confronting our deepest insecurities. Peter Griffin isn't just a cartoon character. He's a mirror reflecting our own struggles with adulthood, responsibility, and self-acceptance. His story is ultimately about someone trying to figure out how to be a good person despite being fundamentally unprepared for adult life. And in that struggle, we see ourselves. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching random comedy sketches. You're witnessing the ongoing saga of a man wrestling with the same questions we all face. Who am I really? Am I good enough? And how do I build a meaningful life when I feel completely overwhelmed by the complexity of existence? Sweet dreams. And remember, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along, just like Peter Griffin. What if I told you that behind the perfect housewife facade lies one of television's most twisted characters? The woman you think you know as the voice of reason in the Griffin household has actually murdered multiple people, cheated on her husband at least 12 times, and may have given birth to a child who isn't even his. This is the untold story of Lois Griffin, and trust me, it's darker than you ever imagined. Most people see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow tolerates Peter's antics while keeping their chaotic family together. But that's exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that Lois Griffin has one of the most disturbing character arcs in animated television, filled with secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. From her privileged upbringing to her descent into madness, Every chapter of her life reveals new layers of dysfunction that will completely change how you see this seemingly innocent character. Let me take you back to where it all began. Lois wasn't always a Griffin. She was born Lois Pewterschmidt into one of the most powerful and dysfunctional families on the East Coast. Picture this, a sprawling mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where money flowed like water, but emotional warmth was as rare as honest politicians. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, built an empire on ruthless business practices, while her mother, Babs, played the role of the perfect trophy wife, both too busy with their own ambitions to give their children the love they desperately needed. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Lois had a brother named Patrick, and this family secret will haunt you. As a young child, Patrick witnessed something so traumatic involving his mother that it broke his mind completely. Carter's solution wasn't therapy or family healing. He had his own son shipped off to a mental institution and erased from family history like he never existed. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, emotional brutality that would set the tone for how this family handled problems, make them disappear. Growing up in this environment, Lois and her sister Carol developed completely different survival mechanisms. Carol became desperate for male attention, rushing into relationship after relationship, collecting divorces like trophies. By the time we meet her, she's been married and divorced 8 times. Each failed relationship a symptom of the emotional void their parents created. But Lois chose a different path. Rebellion disguised as conformity. As a teenager, Lois discovered a passion for modeling. For once, she had found something that made her feel alive, something that was hers. But when a legitimate modeling contract was offered, Carter crushed her dreams without hesitation. His exact words were chilling. His daughter would not lower herself to such work. This wasn't parental protection. This was control, masked as concern for social status. And this moment planted the first seeds of the resentment that would later explode into her adult dysfunction. College became Lois's escape hatch, but instead of finding freedom, she found chaos. At Kent State University, she threw herself into everything her controlling father had forbidden. She partied with reckless abandon, broke every rule she could find, and made choices that would haunt her for decades. The most shocking of these was starring in an adult film, not for money or fame, but as the ultimate act of rebellion against her family's pristine image. Think about the psychology here. This wasn't some wild phase or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a young woman so damaged by emotional neglect and control that she was willing to do anything to feel like she had agency over her own life. The fact that she shared this secret so casually with a reporter she barely knew tells us everything about her desperate need for authenticity in a life built on lies and appearances. But the real bombshell comes when we examine how she met Peter Griffin. Here's where the story becomes almost too bizarre to believe. Peter wasn't some college boyfriend or family friend. He was literally hired as a pool boy to clean her family's estate. Picture the scene. The refined daughter of a billionaire family falls for a man whose greatest talent is making fart jokes. On the surface, it looks like a classic opposites attract romance. But dig deeper, and you'll see the psychological warfare at play. Lois choosing Peter wasn't love at first sight. It was the nuclear option in her war against her father's expectations. Carter had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career choices to her social circle. So she chose the one person guaranteed to horrify him, a working-class man with 0 social graces and fewer brain cells. This wasn't romance. This was revenge, with wedding vows. When Carter discovered their relationship, his reaction was swift and brutal. He had Peter knocked, unconscious and dumped in the middle of the ocean like some kind of mob hit. But Peter survived, and here's where things get interesting. Carter then offered Peter $1 million to walk away forever. Peter's response reveals something crucial about their dynamic. He turned down the money, claiming Lois was worth more to him than cash. But his exact words were telling. He said she was worthless to him, which is why he loved her. This wasn't the romantic declaration it appeared to be. This was two damaged people finding each other through mutual dysfunction. Peter saw in Lois someone who wouldn't judge his failures because she was running from her own. Lois saw in Peter the ultimate weapon against her family's suffocating expectations. Their love story wasn't built on compatibility or shared values. It was built on shared rebellion against the lives they were supposed to live. The cracks in this foundation became obvious almost immediately. When they tried to start fresh, after college, they broke up. Lois got engaged to Tom Tucker, a much more logical choice that her family approved of. But Peter couldn't let go, not because of love, but because losing Lois meant losing his identity as the rebel who stole the rich girl. So he crashed her wedding in a desperate last-ditch effort to reclaim what he saw as his greatest achievement. What happened next reveals the true toxicity of their relationship. Lois was already pregnant with Meg when they eloped, which means their entire marriage was built on necessity rather than choice. She literally couldn't back out even if she wanted to. This detail reframes their entire relationship. Every fight, every moment of dysfunction, every terrible decision can be traced back to this moment when two people trapped themselves in a marriage neither really wanted. Parenthood didn't fix their problems. It amplified them exponentially. Their first instinct as new parents was to abandon Meg at a fire station. When that failed, they took her home to Spooner Street, but the damage was already done. This child represented everything wrong with their relationship. Unplanned, unwanted, and a constant reminder of the life neither had chosen. As more children arrived, Lois's parenting style became increasingly unhinged. With Meg, she started as a protective mother, but gradually became cruel and dismissive. The most heartbreaking example is when Meg pours her heart out, telling Lois she loves her, and Lois can't bring herself to say it back. This isn't just poor parenting. This is emotional abandonment that mirrors her own childhood trauma. But Meg isn't the only victim of Lois's maternal dysfunction. She's physically abused Stewie, getting so desperate for pills that she dunked his head in a toilet to retrieve one that fell in. She ran over him with her car and immediately tried to cover it up, rather than face the consequences. These aren't accidents or momentary lapses. They're patterns of behavior that reveals someone completely detached from normal parental instincts. Even with Chris, supposedly her favorite, she's done things that cross every line of appropriate motherly behavior. When rumors spread that he was involved with an attractive teacher, instead of shutting down the inappropriate speculation, she confirmed it herself. This isn't protective parenting. This is a woman so desperate for attention that she'll exploit her own children to get it. The drug addiction storyline reveals just how far Lois has fallen from her privileged upbringing. This isn't recreational use or social experimentation. This is full-blown addiction that turns her into a criminal. She starts dealing drugs, becomes a kleptomaniac, and eventually graduates to violent crime. The woman who grew up in mansions is now poisoning baristas and kidnapping innocent people to maintain her position as the best customer at a coffee shop. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's character is her complete moral flexibility. She runs for mayor claiming to fight corruption, then immediately becomes as corrupt as the person she replaced. She allows oil companies to dump waste in the city's water supply for money. This isn't political compromise. This is selling out an entire community for personal gain. Her relationship with violence is equally troubling. She's admitted to killing multiple people, including a waitress on their honeymoon as part of some sick game with Peter. She traumatized Chris by revealing she'd killed someone with her car, then casually mentioned that all mothers have killed someone, as if murder was just another household chore. The pattern becomes clear when you look at her complete story. Every major decision in Lois's life has been driven by one of two motives: rebelling against her family's expectations, or covering up the consequences of previous rebellions. She chose Peter to spite her father. She had children because she was trapped. She became addicted to drugs to cope with her choices. She turned to crime to support her addictions. Each step led inevitably to the next in a downward spiral that shows no signs of stopping. Her infidelity adds another layer to this psychological profile. Lois hasn't just cheated on Peter occasionally. She's been systematically unfaithful throughout their entire marriage. She's had affairs with Bill Clinton, rock stars from the 80s, and even Peter's own half-brother. The most shocking revelation is her admission that Chris might not even be Peter's biological son, the result of an affair with actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. This isn't a woman struggling with temptation. This is someone who views marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments. Her pattern of cheating reveals someone incapable of genuine intimacy, constantly seeking validation from new partners because she's never resolved the emotional damage from her childhood. The psychological implications become even more disturbing when you consider her relationships with Brian and Quagmire. Both men have been obsessed with her for years, and in alternate timelines, she's married both of them. This suggests that her appeal isn't based on genuine connection, but on some kind of emotional unavailability that draws damaged men to her like moths to a flame. Her bisexual tendencies, while potentially representing healthy sexual exploration, fit the same pattern. She kisses women impulsively, fantasizes about running away with female cashiers, and engages in passionate encounters with friends' wives. But these aren't expressions of genuine sexual identity. They're more rebellion, more ways to shock and transgress against social expectations. As Lois ages, the consequences of her choices begin catching up with her. By her 50th birthday, doctors are warning she might not survive much longer due to the physical toll of her lifestyle and the violence she's experienced. Stewie planted a time bomb in her uterus as an infant, and Chris nearly killed her during childbirth. These details aren't just dark humor. They're metaphors for how her own children have become weapons turned against her, the inevitable result of her toxic parenting. The future episodes show Lois and Peter still together in their retirement home. But this isn't a happy ending. It's two people too damaged and codependent to separate, even when they probably should. Their adult children push them into assisted living, suggesting that even as grown-ups, the Griffin kids can't wait to get their parents out of their lives. But here's what makes Lois truly fascinating as a character. She's not entirely unsympathetic. Every terrible thing she's done can be traced back to the emotional neglect and control she experienced as a child. Her father crushed her dreams and treated her like a possession. Her mother was absent and cold. Her brother was literally erased from family history when he became inconvenient. Is it any wonder she grew up incapable of healthy relationships or appropriate boundaries? The tragedy of Lois Griffin isn't that she became a terrible person. It's that she never had a real chance to become anything else. Every relationship in her life has been transactional or manipulative. She learned early that love comes with conditions and that people will abandon you if you become inconvenient. So she became someone who abandons others first, who cheats before being cheated on, who hurts before being hurt. Her criminal behavior isn't random chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a life spent learning that rules don't apply to people with money and power. Her father built an empire through ruthless business practices and made problems disappear through violence and money. Is it surprising that his daughter grew up thinking murder and corruption were just more extreme versions of normal problem solving? The drug addiction storyline reveals someone desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never wanted. The cheating shows someone searching for connection she's never experienced. The violent outbursts demonstrate someone who learned early that force and manipulation get better results than honesty and vulnerability. Even her relationship with Peter, dysfunctional as it is, represents her attempt to break free from the toxic patterns of her childhood. She chose someone completely different from her father, someone who couldn't control or manipulate her through money or social pressure. The problem is that she chose someone equally damaged, someone whose emotional instability matched her own. The most disturbing aspect of Lois's story is how it reflects real-world patterns of generational trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle to form healthy relationships as adults. They may seek out partners who replicate familiar patterns of dysfunction because chaos feels like home. They may become abusive parents themselves, not out of malice, but because they never learned healthy parenting models. Lois's story is a masterclass in how privilege can't protect children from emotional damage. All the money in the world couldn't give her what she really needed. parents who loved her unconditionally and supported her dreams. Instead, she got parents who treated her like a business asset and a social accessory, valued only for how she reflected on their reputation. The brilliance of her character lies in how the show presents her as both victim and villain simultaneously. Yes, she's done terrible things that hurt innocent people. But understanding why she did them doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains how someone becomes capable of such actions. She's a cautionary tale about what happens when children don't receive the emotional foundation they need to become healthy adults. Her relationship with her own children reflects this cycle of dysfunction. She can't give them what she never received herself. Her inability to say "I love you" to Meg isn't just cruelty. It's the echo of parents who never said those words to her. Her physical abuse of Stewie mirrors the emotional violence she experienced growing up. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Lois's character is how normal she appears on the surface. She's articulate, intelligent, and socially skilled when she needs to be. She can play the role of the concerned mother, the devoted wife, the responsible citizen. This ability to present a functional facade while being completely broken inside makes her more dangerous than someone whose dysfunction is obvious. The show's genius lies in slowly revealing the depths of her damage over time. Early episodes presented her as the reasonable one, the moral center of the family. But as the series progressed, each new revelation stripped away another layer of that facade until we saw the broken person underneath. This isn't character assassination. It's archaeological excavation, uncovering the psychological damage that was always there but carefully hidden. Looking at Lois Griffin's complete story, we see a masterpiece of character development that illustrates how childhood trauma can echo through generations. She's not just a cartoon character making bad choices for laughs. She's a complex psychological portrait of someone whose entire life has been shaped by early emotional wounds that never healed. Her story serves as a dark mirror to the American dream, showing how wealth and privilege can create their own forms of destruction. The Pewterschmidt family had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. And their daughter grew up to become living proof that you can't buy emotional health or authentic human connection. The most disturbing realization about Lois Griffin is that she's not an anomaly. She's a recognizable type. We all know people who seem to have everything together on the surface, but whose personal lives are complete disasters. We see them in positions of power, making decisions that affect others while being completely incapable of managing their own emotional lives. Lois Griffin's entire story is a cautionary tale about the price of emotional neglect and the generational transmission of trauma. She started as a victim of her parents' dysfunction and became the architect of her children's future therapy bills. Her legacy isn't the crimes she's committed or the people she's hurt. It's the cycle of damage that will likely continue through her own children unless they find ways to break free from the patterns she's established. In the end, Lois Griffin represents one of television's most complex and disturbing character studies. She's simultaneously the victim of generational trauma and the perpetrator of new trauma, a woman whose entire life has been shaped by her unsuccessful attempts to escape the emotional prison her parents built around her childhood. Understanding her story doesn't excuse her actions, but it does explain how someone becomes capable of such systematic dysfunction while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The brilliance of her character lies not in the shocking things she does, but in how those actions reflect deeper patterns of psychological damage that make perfect sense once you understand where she came from. She's not crazy. She's the logical product of her environment, which makes her story both more tragic and more terrifying than any random acts of villainy could ever be. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m, and you just need something to help your brain wind down? Well, tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy with some absolutely random facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the bizarre universe of Quahog together. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But something incredible happened that brought it back from the dead. Adult Swim started airing reruns, and the show's popularity exploded like Peter Griffin trying to open a jar of pickles. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they'd made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Family Guy came back from cancellation, making it one of the very few shows in television history to pull off this resurrection trick twice. Speaking of resurrections, here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin's voice. Seth MacFarlane, who voices the intellectual dog, actually based Brian's sophisticated accent and mannerisms on his own personality. MacFarlane has said in interviews that Brian is essentially his voice in the show, which explains why the dog often serves as the voice of reason, at least when he's not having his own ridiculous adventures. It's almost like MacFarlane created his own animated alter ego to comment on the chaos around him. Now here's a fact that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail, even in its most absurd moments. The Griffin family's address is 31 Spooner Street, and this isn't just a random number pulled out of thin air. The address is actually a reference to the street where one of the show's early writers lived. But what's even more interesting is that if you look carefully at episodes throughout the series, you'll notice that the layout of the Griffin house has changed multiple times. Sometimes there are different numbers of windows, the staircase moves around, and rooms appear and disappear like they're in some kind of cartoon physics experiment. Let's talk about Stewie Griffin for a moment, because this character has one of the most fascinating evolution arcs in animated television. In the early seasons, Stewie was genuinely diabolical, plotting to kill his mother Lois and take over the world with elaborate schemes that would make a Bond villain jealous. But as the series progressed, the writers gradually shifted his character from evil mastermind to sophisticated, cultured, and eventually openly exploring his sexuality. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that this evolution happened naturally as they discovered what made the character funnier and more relatable. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode, the writers were working on it almost a year ago. This lengthy production timeline is part of why the show sometimes feels like it's commenting on events that happened ages ago, but it also explains the incredible attention to detail in the animation and voice work. Did you know that the famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become a recurring gag? The first chicken fight appeared in a Season 1 episode as a quick throwaway joke, but it became so popular with fans that the writers kept bringing it back, each time making the fights longer and more elaborate. These sequences have become some of the most expensive and time-consuming parts of the show to animate, sometimes taking up several minutes of screen time with incredibly detailed action sequences. Speaking of expensive sequences, the show's cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, were actually inspired by classic comedy shows like The Carol Burnett Show. Seth MacFarlane wanted to recreate that feeling of sketches within a larger show, but he took it to the extreme by making the cutaways completely disconnected from the main plot. Some of these gags have become so iconic that they've spawned their own merchandise and internet memes. Here's a heartwarming fact about the show's impact on real families. Despite all the dysfunction and chaos of the Griffin family, many real families have said that watching Family Guy together has actually brought them closer. There's something about laughing at Peter's ridiculous antics that makes your own family's problems seem manageable in comparison. The show has become a bonding experience for parents and older children who can appreciate the humor together. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that'll make you listen to the characters differently. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was only 14 years old when she started on the show. She actually lied about her age during the audition process, and by the time the producers found out how young she really was, they were so impressed with her work that they kept her on. She's been voicing Meg for over 20 years now, which means she's literally grown up with the character. Here's something interesting about the show's relationship with censorship. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are actually several episodes that have never aired on television due to content issues. These episodes exist in various forms, sometimes appearing on DVD releases or streaming platforms with heavy warnings. The writers often create content knowing it might be too controversial for broadcast, almost as a creative challenge to see how far they can push the envelope. The character of Cleveland Brown was so popular that he got his own spin-off show. But here's something you might not know about that decision. The Cleveland show was partly created because Mike Henry, who voices Cleveland, wanted to explore what it would be like to have an animated show centered around an African-American family. While the spin-off only lasted 4 seasons, it allowed the writers to tackle different types of stories and social issues than they could in Family Guy. Did you know that several major celebrities have turned down guest appearances on Family Guy because they felt the show was too controversial? But for every celebrity who said no, there were dozens who said yes, often because they were fans of the show themselves. Some of the most surprising guest stars have been people you'd never expect to appear on an adult animated comedy, including several politicians and news anchors who were willing to make fun of themselves. Here's a production fact that shows how much work goes into creating the show's signature style. The animators use a specific color palette that's deliberately muted compared to other animated shows. This choice was made to give Family Guy a slightly more realistic feel, even though the content is completely absurd. The character designs are also intentionally simple, which allows the animators to focus on facial expressions and body language that enhance the comedy. Let's talk about the show's impact on internet culture. Family Guy was one of the first television shows to really embrace social media and online fan communities. The writers regularly read fan feedback and sometimes incorporate popular fan theories or suggestions into actual episodes. This interaction between creators and fans was revolutionary for television at the time and has influenced how many other shows approach their online presence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's educational value. Despite its reputation for crude humor, Family Guy has actually introduced many viewers to classical music, literature, and historical references they might never have encountered otherwise. The show's cutaway gags often reference everything from Shakespeare to classical composers, and many fans have said they discovered new interests because of jokes they didn't initially understand. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has always been interesting, especially since both shows air on the same network. There have been several crossover episodes and references between the shows, but there's also been some friendly rivalry. Seth MacFarlane has always acknowledged The Simpsons as a major influence, but he's also tried to carve out a distinct identity for Family Guy that sets it apart from Matt Groening's creation. Here's a fact about the show's international reach that might surprise you. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and adapted for different cultures around the world. In some countries, certain jokes have to be completely rewritten because the original references don't translate culturally. This has led to some interesting variations where different versions of the same episode can have completely different gags while maintaining the same basic story structure. Did you know that several episodes of Family Guy have been turned into stage productions? There have been live performances of selected episodes at various comedy festivals, with voice actors performing their roles on stage while animation plays in the background. These performances have given fans a unique way to experience the show and have shown how well the writing works, even without the visual component. The show's theme song, which seems simple enough, actually went through multiple versions before the creators settled on the current one. The original pilot had a completely different opening sequence, and there have been several special versions created for holiday episodes and milestone celebrations. The song has become so iconic that it's been covered by numerous bands and has appeared in various other media as a cultural reference. Point. Here's something about the writing process that shows how collaborative the show really is. While Seth MacFarlane created the show and voices several main characters, the writing staff includes dozens of people who contribute jokes, storylines, and character development. Some of the funniest gags in the show come from writers who might never be credited on screen, but whose contributions are essential to the show's success. Let's talk about how Family Guy handles continuity, or rather, how it completely ignores it when convenient. Characters die and come back to life. Relationships change from episode to episode, and major life events are forgotten or contradicted regularly. This approach to storytelling was initially criticized by some viewers who expected more consistency, but it's actually become one of the show's defining characteristics, allowing for maximum creative freedom. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive, including everything from action figures to clothing to home decor items featuring the characters. But here's something interesting. Some of the most popular merchandise features quotes and images from the most controversial episodes, suggesting that fans embrace the show's boundary-pushing content rather than shy away from it. Finally, here's a fact that brings us full circle to why Family Guy works so well as late-night viewing. The show's creators have always understood that comedy is often about timing and rhythm, and they've structured episodes to have natural peaks and valleys of energy. This makes it perfect for falling asleep to, because your brain can follow the familiar patterns even as you drift off, and the comfort of recognizing character voices and running gags creates a soothing background that helps many people relax. As you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, there are animators working on new Family Guy episodes that won't air for almost a year, writers brainstorming increasingly ridiculous scenarios for Peter to stumble into, and voice actors bringing these beloved characters to life. The world of Quahog continues to evolve and surprise us, proving that even after more than 20 years, there are still new stories to tell and new ways to make us laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all. Sweet dreams. And may your subconscious be filled with talking dogs, evil babies, and the gentle chaos of the Griffin family household. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're here looking for some sleepy time content about everyone's favorite animated chaos, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving deep into the wild world of Quahog with some fascinating Family Guy facts that'll ease you into dreamland. So grab your pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the bizarre universe that Seth MacFarlane created. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator has just pitched what would become one of television's most controversial and beloved animated series. Seth MacFarlane was only 25 years old when he created Family Guy, making him one of the youngest creators in television history to have his own primetime animated show. The pilot episode cost a mere $50,000 to produce, which is practically pocket change by today's animation standards. MacFarlane not only created the show, but also voices 4 of the main characters, including Peter Griffin, Brian the dog, Stewie, the scowling baby, and the perverted neighbor, Glenn Quagmire. Speaking of voices, here's something that might surprise you. The voice of Meg Griffin has changed over the years, but not in the way you might think. Originally, Lacey Chabert from Mean Girls fame voiced the teenage daughter during the first season and most of the second season. However, due to scheduling conflicts with her other projects, Mila Kunis took over the role starting in season 2. Interestingly, Kunis was initially hesitant about taking the job because she thought it was just a temporary gig. Little did she know, she'd be voicing the character for over 2 decades. The show's production history is almost as chaotic as the Griffin family itself. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened after the second season in 2000. Then it was brought back for a third season, only to be canceled again in 2002. What saved the show was something unprecedented at the time. DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox decided to resurrect the series in 2005. This made Family Guy the first canceled show in television history to be brought back primarily due to DVD sales and cable reruns. Let's talk about the town of Quahog for a moment. While it's fictional, MacFarlane based it on his own hometown of Kent, Connecticut. Many of the locations in the show are inspired by real places from his childhood. The Drunken Clam, where Peter and his friends hang out, was inspired by a real bar in Kent. Even some of the street names in Quahog are taken directly from streets in MacFarlane's hometown. This personal touch gives the show an authentic feel, despite its outrageous storylines. Here's a fact that might keep you up thinking about the complexity of animation. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with the writers creating the script, which can take several weeks. Then comes the voice, recording, followed by animatic creation, character design, background painting, and finally animation. A single 22-minute episode requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. That's nearly 700 drawings per minute of finished animation. Brian the dog is arguably one of the most complex characters in animation history. He's an intellectual who drinks martinis, writes novels, and has strong political opinions. But here's something fascinating about his character development. McFarlane originally intended for Brian to be more of a traditional pet character, but as the show progressed, Brian became increasingly humanized. The character serves as McFarlane's voice for political commentary and social criticism. Brian's pretentious personality and liberal viewpoints often reflect McFarlane's own beliefs, making the dog essentially the creator's animated alter ego. The show's cutaway gags, those random flashback scenes that have nothing to do with the main plot, were inspired by McFarlane's love of classic comedy. He drew inspiration from shows like The Carol Burnett Show and Saturday Night Live. These cutaways became one of Family Guy's most distinctive features, allowing the writers to include jokes and references that wouldn't fit into the main storyline. Some episodes contain up to 15 different cutaway gags, each requiring its own mini production cycle. Stewie Griffin's character underwent one of the most dramatic transformations in television history. In the early seasons, Stewie was portrayed as an evil genius baby bent on world domination and matricide. His primary goal was killing his mother, Lois. However, as the series progressed, the writers shifted his character toward being more flamboyantly gay and less homicidal. This transformation wasn't planned from the beginning, but evolved naturally as the writers discovered what worked best for the character's comedy potential. The show's musical numbers deserve special recognition. McFarlane, who studied animation at the Rhode Island School of Design, is also an accomplished singer and musician. Many of Family Guy's musical sequences showcase his talents, particularly the big band and jazz numbers. The episode Road to Rhode Island featured a musical number that was so well received it spawned an entire series of road episodes pairing Brian and Stewie together. These musical interludes often require months of additional production time and specialized animators who can synchronize character movements with complex musical arrangements. Here's something about the show's writing process that's quite remarkable. The Family Guy writers' room operates differently from most television shows. Instead of having a traditional hierarchy, McFarlane encourages a collaborative environment where any writer can pitch jokes or storylines. The writers often compete to see who can come up with the most outrageous or offensive joke, pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable on television. This competitive atmosphere has resulted in some of the show's most memorable and controversial moments. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be named Justin Peter Griffin, but McFarlane shortened it to just Peter. The character's appearance and personality were inspired by a security guard McFarlane knew at his college. Peter's distinctive laugh, that wheezing giggle that fans love or hate, was actually improvised by McFarlane during early recording sessions. The laugh became so popular with the production team that they decided to make it a permanent part of the character. Cleveland Brown, Peter's neighbor and friend, was given his own spin-off show called The Cleveland Show, which ran for 4 seasons from 2009 to 2013. Interestingly, the character was created as a way to add diversity to the main cast, but McFarlane has admitted that writing for Cleveland was challenging because he didn't want to rely on racial stereotypes for humor. The character's calm, measured personality served as a counterbalance to Peter's chaotic energy. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years. Early episodes had a more rough, hand-drawn quality that reflected the show's limited budget. As the series became more successful, the animation became more polished and computer-assisted. However, McFarlane insisted on maintaining certain stylistic choices, like the character's simple designs and limited color palette, to preserve the show's original charm. Family Guy has featured an impressive roster of celebrity guest stars over the years. These appearances range from brief cameos to full character roles. What's interesting is that many celebrities specifically request to appear on the show because of its cultural impact. The writers often create characters specifically tailored to the guest star's personality or public image, resulting in some surprisingly authentic performances. The show's controversial content has led to numerous censorship battles with network executives and standards departments. MacFarlane has stated in interviews that approximately 10% of each script gets cut or modified due to content concerns. Some jokes that are deemed too offensive are replaced with alternate versions, while others are moved to the DVD releases as deleted scenes. This constant push and pull between creative freedom and broadcast standards has actually improved the show's writing, forcing the creators to be more clever with their humor. Here's a production detail that animation fans will appreciate. Family Guy uses a technique called limited animation, which means characters are drawn with simplified movements to save time and money. However, the show occasionally breaks this rule for special sequences, particularly musical numbers or action scenes. These moments of full animation stand out dramatically and create a more cinematic feel. The Griffin family house has become iconic in its own right. The interior layout has remained remarkably consistent throughout the series, which is unusual for animated shows. Most animated series change room layouts as needed for specific jokes or storylines, but Family Guy maintains architectural continuity. The house was designed to feel like a real middle-class American home, complete with believable room proportions and logical furniture placement. Quagmire's character represents one of the show's most problematic elements, but also demonstrates MacFarlane's willingness to explore uncomfortable territory for comedy. The character's predatory behavior toward women would be completely unacceptable in live action, but the animated format allows the show to examine toxic masculinity through exaggeration and absurdity. It's a delicate balance that doesn't always work, but it shows the unique possibilities of animated comedy. The show's timeline is intentionally confusing and contradictory. Characters reference current events and pop culture from different decades within the same episode. This temporal flexibility allows the writers to make jokes about any topic regardless of when it occurred. Stewie remains a baby despite the series spanning over 20 years, and other characters don't age either. This suspended animation of time keeps the show perpetually contemporary. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. The show was one of the first television series to embrace meme culture, with countless clips and quotes becoming viral sensations. The cutaway gags are perfectly suited for short-form internet content, and many viewers discover the show through social media clips rather than traditional television viewing. The voice acting process for Family Guy is quite different from other animated shows. Most animated series record voices individually, but Family Guy often records multiple actors together to capture natural conversation rhythms. This technique results in more spontaneous performances and allows for improvisation that wouldn't be possible with solo recording sessions. MacFarlane has stated that he originally intended Family Guy to run for only a few seasons, but the show's success has extended its life far beyond his initial vision. This longevity has allowed for character development and storyline complexity that wasn't possible in the early seasons. Characters have been able to grow and change in ways that reflect real human development, even within the show's absurdist framework. The show's merchandise empire extends far beyond typical television tie-ins. Family Guy products range from clothing and accessories to home goods and collectibles. The Stewie Griffin character alone has spawned hundreds of different products, making him one of the most marketable animated characters of the 21st century. As we drift towards sleep, it's worth reflecting on how Family Guy changed television animation forever. The show proved that adult-oriented animated comedy could be successful in prime time, paving the way for shows like American Dad, Bob's Burgers, and Rick and Morty. Its irreverent humor and willingness to tackle controversial subjects opened doors for creative freedom that didn't exist before. The Griffin family may be dysfunctional, chaotic, and often morally questionable, but they've provided millions of viewers with laughter, comfort, and escapism. Whether you love them or hate them, they've become part of our cultural landscape, a shared reference point that brings people together through humor. So, as you close your eyes tonight, maybe you'll dream of Quahog, where dogs can talk, babies can build time machines, and anything is possible. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the words of Peter Griffin, sometimes the most important thing is just to keep laughing, even when life gets crazy. Sleep well, Family Guy fans. Tomorrow is another day in the wonderful world of animation, full of new jokes, new characters, and new reasons to appreciate the art of storytelling through laughter. Good night, and thanks for joining us on this journey through the facts and trivia of one of television's most enduring animated families. Welcome back, night owls and daydreamers. Tonight we're diving deep into the chaotic world of Quahog with some fascinating Family Guy facts that'll have you drifting off to sleep with a smile. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the Griffin family madness, these relaxing tidbits about one of animation's most controversial shows will guide you gently into dreamland. Let's start our journey back to 1999, when Family Guy first graced television screens. The show almost never happened at all. Creator Seth MacFarlane was working as a writer and animator for Hanna-Barbera when he created two animated shorts called The Life of Larry and Larry and Steve. These featured a man and his talking dog, which would eventually evolve into Peter and Brian Griffin. Fox executives were so impressed with MacFarlane's work that they gave him an unprecedented deal for someone so young, making him the youngest person ever to create a primetime series for the network at just 24 years old. The original pilot episode had a much smaller budget than later episodes, which is why the animation looks noticeably different. The Griffin house interior was actually based on the house from another famous animated family, but with some creative liberties taken. MacFarlane has mentioned that he wanted the show to feel lived in and realistic, despite all the absurd situations the family would find themselves in. Speaking of the Griffin family, each character was carefully designed to represent different aspects of the American family dynamic. Peter Griffin, the bumbling patriarch, was inspired by MacFarlane's own father and various blue-collar workers he'd observed growing up in Connecticut. His distinctive laugh wasn't originally planned. It just happened naturally during recording sessions, and the creators decided to keep it because it felt so authentic to the character. Lois Griffin underwent several design changes before settling on her final appearance. Originally, she was going to have a completely different personality, more stern and less patient with her family's antics. The writers quickly realized that having someone slightly more grounded would make the show's more outrageous moments feel more believable. Her background as a wealthy heiress was added later to explain how the family could afford their lifestyle despite Peter's various job changes and general incompetence. The character of Meg started out very differently than how fans know her today. In the early seasons, she was treated more like a regular teenage daughter dealing with typical adolescent problems. The running joke of the entire family treating her terribly wasn't established until later seasons. This shift reflected the show's overall evolution toward more extreme and absurd humor over time. Chris Griffin was originally going to be the smart one in the family, but the writers felt this would create too much overlap with Brian's role as the voice of reason. Instead, they made him dim-witted but good-hearted, which created better comedic opportunities and family dynamics. His voice actor actually had to learn to make his voice crack consistently to maintain the character's adolescent sound as the show progressed through multiple seasons. Stewie Griffin is perhaps the most complex character in terms of development. His evil, genius baby persona was inspired by various movie villains, but his sophisticated vocabulary and adult concerns created an interesting contradiction that the writers loved exploring. The ambiguity around his sexual orientation was intentional from early on, with MacFarlane wanting to create a character that defied easy categorization. The family dog Brian started as a relatively simple character, but evolved into something much more complex. He was meant to be the straight man to the family's chaos, offering occasional wisdom and commentary. His human-like behavior was the central joke, a dog who acted more civilized than his human family members. The character served as MacFarlane's voice in many episodes, expressing his own political views and social commentary through Brian's dialogue and actions. Family Guy's animation style was heavily influenced by classic cartoons, but with modern sensibilities. The character designs were kept relatively simple to allow for faster animation production, but the backgrounds were often incredibly detailed. The color palette was specifically chosen to feel warm and inviting, like a real family home, which contrasted nicely with the show's often chaotic storylines. The show's famous cutaway gags weren't originally planned as a major feature. They started as occasional diversions but became more frequent when the writers realized how much creative freedom they provided. These sequences allowed the show to explore completely unrelated scenarios and parody different time periods, movies, and cultural phenomena without being constrained by the main plot. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how much the voice actors contribute to their characters' development. Many of the show's funniest moments came from improvisation during recording sessions. The actors would often suggest alternative line readings or add physical comedy that would then be animated to match their performance. The show's musical numbers weren't part of the original concept, but became increasingly important as the series progressed. McFarlane's background in musical theater and his love of classic show tunes influenced many of these sequences. The elaborate production numbers often required months of preparation and coordination between the animation, music, and voice departments. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has been complicated throughout its run. The show has pushed boundaries since its inception, but network standards have evolved over the years. Many episodes have alternate versions with different jokes or sequences depending on when and where they're broadcast. This has created an interesting archive of content that varies significantly across different platforms and time periods. The series has featured an incredible array of celebrity guest stars over the years, many of whom were fans of the show before appearing on it. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others made single appearances that became memorable moments for fans. The show's writers often write specific roles with particular actors in mind, creating unique opportunities for both established and emerging performers. Behind the scenes, Family Guy's production schedule is incredibly demanding. Each episode takes months to complete, from initial script to final animation. The process involves dozens of artists, writers, and technicians working in coordination. Despite this complexity, the show has maintained a remarkably consistent output for over 2 decades. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy references and quotes have become part of everyday conversation for many fans. The show's influence can be seen in countless other animated series that followed, many of which adopted similar humor styles and narrative structures. Family Guy's cancellation and subsequent revival is one of television's most interesting stories. After being canceled twice, the show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on cable networks. This proved that there was still a significant audience for the show's particular brand of humor, leading to its eventual return to primetime television. The evolution of animation technology has dramatically changed how Family Guy is produced. Early seasons required hand-drawn animation cells, while modern episodes are created entirely digitally. This technological shift has allowed for more complex visual effects and faster production times, but some fans prefer the slightly rougher aesthetic of the earlier seasons. Family Guy's international success has led to numerous international versions and adaptations. Different countries have created their own versions of the show with local characters and cultural references. These adaptations provide fascinating insights into how humor translates across different cultures and societies. The show's merchandise empire extends into virtually every category imaginable. From clothing and toys to video games and books, Family Guy has become a brand unto itself. This commercial success has helped fund the show's continued production and allowed for increasingly ambitious episodes and special events. Family Guy's writing process involves a large team of contributors working collaboratively. Story ideas can come from anywhere, and the show's writer's room is known for its freewheeling creative atmosphere. Many of the show's most memorable episodes began as simple throwaway comments that evolved into full storylines through group brainstorming sessions. The show's holiday episodes have, quote, become annual traditions for many families. These special episodes often feature elaborate musical numbers and heartwarming moments that contrast with the show's typically irreverent tone. The Christmas episodes in particular have become comfort viewing for many fans during the holiday season. Family Guy's relationship with social media has evolved significantly over the years. The show's official accounts regularly share behind-the-scenes content, and the writers often interact directly with fans online. This direct connection between creators and audience has influenced how episodes are developed and promoted. The series has tackled numerous social and political issues throughout its run, often generating significant discussion and sometimes controversy. These episodes demonstrate the show's willingness to engage with serious topics while maintaining its comedic perspective. The balance between entertainment and commentary has been a defining characteristic of the series. Family Guy's sound design is incredibly detailed, with each episode featuring hundreds of individual sound effects and musical cues. The show's audio team works closely with the animation department to ensure that every visual gag is supported by appropriate sound. This attention to audio detail helps create the show's distinctive atmosphere. The series has spawned several spin-offs and related projects over the years. These additional shows have allowed the creators to explore different aspects of the Family Guy universe and experiment with new storytelling approaches. Some have been more successful than others, but all have contributed to the overall Family Guy mythology. Family Guy's influence on comedy writing can be seen in numerous other television shows and movies. The show's particular style of rapid-fire jokes and pop culture references has become a template that many other creators have adapted and modified for their own projects. The show's live performances and special events have created unique opportunities for fans to experience Family Guy in different contexts. These events often feature the voice actors performing in character and provide insights into the creative process that aren't available through the regular episodes. Family Guy's educational impact, while perhaps unintentional, has been significant. Many viewers have discovered new music, learned historical facts, or been introduced to classic movies through the show's references and parodies. This accidental educational component has made the show valuable beyond pure entertainment. The series has maintained its relevance across multiple generations of viewers. Parents who watched the show when it first aired now watch it with their own children, creating shared cultural experiences that span decades. This intergenerational appeal has helped ensure the show's continued success. Family Guy's production team includes numerous talented artists who have gone on to create their own successful projects. The show has served as a training ground for many animators, writers, and voice actors who have used their experience to launch their own careers in entertainment. The show's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, allowing for creative freedom while occasionally referencing past events. This flexible approach to storytelling has enabled the writers to explore virtually any scenario without being constrained by previous episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its fan community is uniquely interactive. The show's creators regularly acknowledge fan theories and suggestions, sometimes incorporating them into actual episodes. This collaborative relationship between creators and audience has helped maintain the show's popularity over many years. As we drift towards sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents more than just animated comedy. It's a cultural phenomenon that has brought laughter to millions of viewers worldwide. The show's ability to evolve while maintaining its core identity demonstrates the power of creative persistence and the importance of connecting with audiences on multiple levels. Sweet dreams. And may your rest be filled with the gentle chaos of Quahog, where anything is possible and laughter is always just around the corner. The Griffin family will be there waiting when you wake up, ready with new adventures and timeless humor that continues to entertain after all these years.
Have you ever wondered what happens when you dive deep into the twisted, chaotic universe of Family Guy, while your brain is winding down for sleep? Tonight, we're going on a journey through the most bizarre, darkest, and surprisingly complex lore hidden beneath the surface of Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece. From alternate realities to character deaths that actually matter, from time travel paradoxes to the secret history of Quahog itself, this is going to be the most comprehensive exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths you've ever experienced. But before we begin our descent into this animated rabbit hole, let me warn you, what you're about to discover might change how you see those seemingly random cutaway gags forever. Because underneath all that crude humor and pop culture references lies a narrative so intricate and dark that it makes other animated series look like children's picture books. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and prepare to have your mind blown as we uncover the secret lore of Family Guy that most viewers never notice. Our story begins not with the Griffins we know today, but with a question that haunts every longtime viewer. How many times has this family actually died? The answer is more disturbing than you might think. Throughout the series, we've witnessed multiple universe resets, character resurrections, and timeline manipulations that suggest something far more sinister is happening in Quahog than meets the eye. Let's start with Griffin, whose death in Season 12 wasn't just a ratings stunt. It revealed something crucial about the Family Guy universe. When Brian was killed by a car, the emotional weight of his death felt different from the usual cartoon violence we're accustomed to. But here's where it gets interesting. His replacement, Vinny, wasn't just a random character. He represented a glimpse into what the show could become without its moral compass, its voice of reason in a house full of chaos. The fact that Stewie was able to travel back in time to save Brian tells us something profound about the nature of time itself in this universe. Time travel isn't just a plot device in Family Guy. It's a fundamental force that shapes reality. Stewie's time machine isn't just some random invention. It's connected to a larger cosmic framework that governs how this universe operates. Consider this. Every time we see Stewie travel through time, reality doesn't just change, it fractures. We're shown multiple timelines existing simultaneously, each one revealing different aspects of the Griffin family's true nature. In some timelines, Peter never met Lois. In others, Meg is the favorite child. These aren't just alternate realities for comedy, they're glimpses into the infinite possibilities that exist when time itself becomes malleable. But time travel is just the beginning of Family Guy's cosmic horror. Let's talk about the multiverse theory that runs through the entire series. The show has explicitly confirmed that multiple universes exist, each with their own version of the Griffin family. We've seen evil versions, dog versions, even versions where the family members have completely different personalities and life paths. This multiverse concept becomes even more disturbing when you realize that some episodes might not be taking place in the same universe we started with. That feeling you get when character personalities seem inconsistent or when major events are forgotten. It might not be lazy writing. It might be because we're actually watching a different universe entirely. The chicken fights between Peter and Ernie represent something deeper than just extended fight sequences. They're battles between order and chaos, between different philosophical approaches to existence. Ernie represents structure, routine, and the mundane aspects of daily life. Peter represents pure unrestrained desire, and the rejection of social norms. Their fights aren't just physical confrontations, they're metaphysical battles for the soul of their shared reality. Each chicken fight escalates in scope and destruction, suggesting that these conflicts are affecting the fundamental fabric of their universe. The level of destruction they cause should realistically end civilization as we know it, yet everything returns to normal afterwards. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence of reality itself being reset after each confrontation, maintaining the status quo through cosmic intervention. Now let's examine the true nature of Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire Family Guy universe. On the surface, he's a baby with advanced intelligence and homicidal tendencies. But dig deeper, and you'll find layers of psychological complexity that rival the greatest literary characters. Stewie's relationship with his sexuality isn't just character development. It represents the internal struggle between his intellectual advancement and his emotional immaturity. His confusion about his own identity reflects the broader theme of identity crisis that runs through the entire series. Every Griffin family member struggles with who they really are versus who they think they should be. His scientific inventions aren't just plot devices. They represent humanity's desire to control and manipulate reality itself. Stewie's time machine, his weather control device, his mind control technology, they're all attempts to impose order on a chaotic universe. But every time he uses these inventions, reality becomes more unstable, not less. The most disturbing aspect of Stewie's character is his relationship with Brian. Their friendship represents the only genuine emotional connection in the Griffin household, but it's also the most psychologically complex relationship in the series. Brian serves as both father figure and intellectual, equal to Stewie, creating a dynamic that's simultaneously heartwarming and deeply troubling. Let's shift our focus. to Meg Griffin, the most tragic character in the Family Guy universe. Her treatment by her family isn't just running gag. It's a systematic psychological experiment in how prolonged emotional abuse shapes personality development. Meg represents the scapegoat, the family member who absorbs all the dysfunction and toxicity so that the others can maintain their illusion of normalcy. But here's what most viewers miss. Meg isn't actually the weakest member of the Griffin family. She's the strongest. She endures constant psychological torture and emerges with her sanity relatively intact. In episodes where she finally snaps and fights back, we see glimpses of her true potential. She's not the victim. She's the survivor. The episodes where Meg temporarily gains popularity or success reveal something crucial about the Griffin family dynamic. They literally cannot function without having someone to blame and abuse. When Meg rises above her assigned role, the entire family structure begins to collapse. This suggests that their dysfunction isn't accidental. It's carefully maintained through deliberate psychological manipulation. Chris Griffin represents wasted potential and the tragedy of inherited dysfunction. His artistic abilities and occasional flashes of intelligence show us what he could become in a healthier environment. But he's trapped in a cycle of learned helplessness, modeled after his father's behavior patterns. Chris is what happens when natural talent is systematically crushed by family dysfunction. His relationship with his imaginary friend and his artistic pursuits aren't just character quirks. They're survival mechanisms, ways of maintaining some connection to his authentic self while navigating a family that demands conformity to their twisted value system. Peter Griffin himself is perhaps the most disturbing character when you really analyze his behavior patterns. He isn't just immature or irresponsible. He displays clear signs of multiple personality disorders, sociopathic tendencies, and complete lack of empathy for others. His actions regularly destroy lives, yet he never faces meaningful consequences. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence that Peter exists outside normal social and legal frameworks. He's protected by something larger than himself, some cosmic force that ensures his continued existence regardless of the chaos he creates. Peter Griffin isn't just a bad father and husband. He's an agent of chaos, a force of nature that exists to disrupt order and stability. His job history reveals something interesting about the economic reality of the Family Guy universe. He's worked for toy companies, television networks, and various other industries, often rising to positions of significant power despite his obvious incompetence. This suggests that the economic system itself is fundamentally broken, rewarding chaos and incompetence over skill and dedication. Lois Griffin's psychology is perhaps the most complex of all: the family members. She comes from wealth and privilege but chose to marry into dysfunction. This wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was a deliberate choice that reveals something dark about her character. Lois is addicted to drama and chaos. She could leave Peter at any time, but she stays because the dysfunction feeds something deep within her psyche. Her moments of extreme violence and rage aren't just comedy beats. They're glimpses into her true nature, carefully hidden beneath a facade of suburban respectability. Lois Schmidt Griffin is potentially the most dangerous member of the family because she understands manipulation and control in ways the others don't. Her relationship with her wealthy family reveals the broader class dynamics at play in the Family Guy universe. The Schmidts represent old money, established power structures, and systematic oppression disguised as respectability. Lois chose to reject that world, but she brought its values and methods into her marriage, creating a toxic hybrid of working-class dysfunction and upper-class manipulation. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this story, and its history reveals disturbing truths about American society. Founded on violence and maintained through systematic corruption, Quahog represents every small American town that's slowly dying while pretending everything is fine. The local government is openly corrupt, the police force is incompetent, and the social structures are designed to maintain inequality and dysfunction. Mayor West's obvious mental illness and continued political power isn't just absurd humor. It's commentary on how democratic systems can be manipulated by charismatic figures who appeal to voters' worst impulses. His policies are destructive and nonsensical, yet he remains popular because he validates the community's desire to avoid responsibility for their own problems. The recurring characters in Quahog each represent different aspects of American social dysfunction. Cleveland represents the loyal friend who enables destructive behavior rather than confronting it. Joe represents the warrior mentality that struggles to adapt to civilian life. Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual predation disguised as humor. But it's the relationship between these characters that reveals the true horror of the Family Guy universe. They're all trapped in cycles of mutual enablement, each one preventing the others from growing or changing. Their friendships aren't based on genuine affection or shared values. They're based on mutual need for validation of their worst impulses. The show's treatment of religion reveals another layer of its complex worldview. Religion in Family Guy isn't just mocked or dismissed. It's shown to be another system of control and manipulation, used by both believers and non-believers to justify their behavior and avoid taking responsibility for their actions. The various religious figures who appear throughout the series are almost universally corrupt, hypocritical, or mentally unstable. This isn't anti-religious sentiment. It's commentary on how spiritual concepts can be twisted to serve earthly power structures. The show suggests that genuine spirituality might exist, but it's constantly corrupted by human weakness and desire for control over others. Death himself appears as a recurring character, and his portrayal reveals something profound about the show's philosophy regarding mortality and meaning. Death isn't portrayed as evil or frightening. He's shown as tired, overworked, and occasionally compassionate. This suggests that mortality isn't the enemy in the Family Guy universe. Meaninglessness is the real enemy. The various celebrity encounters throughout the series serve a specific narrative function beyond simple humor. They represent the collision between fantasy and reality, between the Griffin family's delusional self-image and the actual impact they have on the world. Most celebrities in Family Guy are either destroyed by their encounter with the Griffins or reveal themselves to be just as dysfunctional and hollow. This pattern suggests that fame and success in their universe don't actually solve fundamental human problems. The celebrities are just as trapped in cycles of self-destruction and meaninglessness as the regular characters. Success becomes another form of prison, another way to avoid confronting deeper truths about existence and purpose. The show's handling of social and political issues reveals a deeply cynical worldview disguised as mindless entertainment. Every political position is shown to be equally corrupt and self-serving. Every social movement is revealed to have ulterior motives. Every attempt at progress is ultimately futile because human nature itself is fundamentally flawed. But here's where it gets interesting. This cynicism isn't presented as the final word. It's presented as the starting point for authentic human connection. Only after accepting the futility of external solutions do the characters occasionally find moments of genuine love, friendship, and meaning. These moments are rare and usually brief, but they represent the show's true message about what makes life worth living. The darker episodes of Family Guy, the ones that deal with serious topics like domestic violence, addiction, and mental illness, aren't just tonal experiments. They're glimpses into the reality that exists beneath the cartoon violence and crude humor. These episodes suggest that everything we've been laughing at is actually a coping mechanism, a way of dealing with trauma and pain that's too intense to face directly. Stewie and Brian's road trip episodes reveal this most clearly. When these two characters are alone together, away from the family dysfunction, their conversations become deeper and more meaningful. They discuss philosophy, mortality, and the nature of existence itself. These aren't just character development moments. They're the show's way of exploring serious themes without the distraction of constant humor. The time travel episodes create a complex mythology around cause and effect, free will, and determinism. When Stewie changes the past, the consequences ripple through reality in ways that suggest everything is connected to everything else. Small changes create massive alterations in the timeline, implying that individual choices have far more impact than we typically realize. But here's the disturbing part. Despite all the timeline changes and alternate realities, certain core patterns remain constant. The Griffin family dysfunction persists across multiple universes and timelines. This suggests that some aspects of human nature are so fundamental that they transcend individual choice and circumstance. The episodes that focus on Brian's writing career reveal the show's commentary on creative expression and artistic integrity. Brian's struggle to balance commercial success with authentic expression mirrors the show's own position in the entertainment landscape. Family Guy itself exists in the tension between meaningful content and commercial viability, between artistic expression and market demands. His relationship with other writers and artists in the series shows how creative communities can become toxic environments where competition and ego destroy the collaborative spirit that should drive artistic endeavors. The literary world in Family Guy is portrayed as pretentious, shallow, and ultimately meaningless. Yet Brian continues to pursue it because the alternative is accepting that his life has no greater purpose. The show's portrayal of education and intellectual development is particularly dark. Smart characters like Brian and Stewie are often shown to be more miserable than their less intelligent family members. Knowledge and awareness don't lead to happiness or fulfillment. They lead to greater understanding of how meaningless and chaotic existence really is. This anti-intellectual streak isn't promoting ignorance as bliss. It's questioning whether intelligence and education, as they currently exist in our society, actually serve human flourishing or just create new forms of suffering and alienation. The show suggests that wisdom might be different from intelligence, and that genuine understanding might require accepting mystery and uncertainty rather than seeking complete knowledge and control. The musical episodes and cutaway gags serve a specific psychological function beyond simple entertainment. They provide brief escapes from the relentless dysfunction of the main narrative. These moments of pure creativity and joy remind us what human beings are capable of when they're not trapped in cycles of self-destruction and mutual harm. But even these moments are tinged with sadness because they highlight how rare genuine happiness and creativity are in the Griffin family's daily life. The contrast makes their normal dysfunction seem even more tragic and unnecessary. As we reach the end of our deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, what emerges is a picture of a universe that's simultaneously hopeless and hopeful, meaningless and profound. The show presents human nature as fundamentally flawed and destructive, yet it also shows us moments of genuine love, creativity, and connection that make existence worthwhile despite its inherent tragedy. The Griffin family represents all of us at our worst and occasionally at our best. Their dysfunction is our dysfunction, magnified and exaggerated for comedic effect, but rooted in recognizable human weaknesses and fears. Their rare moments of genuine connection remind us that love and meaning are possible, even in the midst of chaos and pain. The true lore of Family Guy isn't hidden in elaborate conspiracy theories or complex mythologies. It's hidden in plain sight, in the psychological patterns and relationship dynamics that drive every episode. It's a show about damaged people trying to connect with each other and failing most of the time, but occasionally succeeding in ways that make all the failure worthwhile. And maybe that's the most profound truth of all. That meaning doesn't come from avoiding dysfunction and chaos, but from finding ways to love and connect despite the inevitable presence of dysfunction and chaos in all human relationships. The Griffins aren't aspirational characters. They're cautionary tales and sources of recognition, mirrors that reflect our own struggles with identity, purpose, and connection. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching crude humor and pop culture references. You're watching one of the most complex examinations of human nature ever created, disguised as mindless entertainment, but actually offering profound insights into what it means to be human in a universe that often seems indifferent to our suffering and our joy. Sweet dreams, and may your own family dysfunction be slightly less chaotic than the Griffins, but no less full of unexpected moments of love and meaning that make it all worthwhile. The lore of Family Guy is ultimately the lore of being human, And that's a story that never really ends. It just keeps evolving with each new episode of our own lives.